Chief Pitts, would you lead us in the pledge? Put your hand over your heart.
To the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
At this time, we'll observe a moment of silence. Madam Secretary, call the roll, please.
Hestev, Guston, Zadra, Sferrazza, Dorch, Ayazi, Kajal.
Here. Before we go to the approval of the agenda, there will be a labor session at 12 noon. And item B6, has been pulled for further research and reports back to us. Approval of agenda unless there's some change. Yes. Item B6 is discussion potential direction to staff right-of-way easements and stuff with water and stuff. For more research and some little more information, we're going to pull that until we get it right. Any other items you want to pull? Okay. Entertain a motion for approval of the agenda. I have a motion. Do I have a second? Got a second. All in favor say aye. Those that oppose, no. Motion carries unanimously. You got a public comment card, and you got another one waiting on you over there. Donna, you want to speak on B2A?
The recreation budget?
Okay, okay, I thought you were a public comment.
No.
Okay. Matt Benedict?
Council members, my name is Matt Benedict. I'm the head coach of Reno Aquatic Club, and I'm here again today just say as a community, aquatics as a whole, and in particular Reno Aquatic Club, we're here to do our part and chip in and do the best we can to make sure all our pools, which we are a tad bit underserved in this community, stay open and give all the kids the opportunity to stay in the water and achieve their goals. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Sam Dene.
Sam Dene, the Encyclopedia of Reno Government. I'm an Air Force Academy graduate. I spent many years flying fighters and bombers, and I was the chairman of the pilots union, one of the pilots unions actually, for Pan American Airways in New York. And the budgetary process was always one of my favorite things. Not. Anyway, oh, by the way, I just happened to be in the area. I didn't make a special trip down here. Of course, you already knew that, and I guess the chief did too, because my tracking device in my brand new dental implant, it seems to be working because I can feel this little buzzing every time you guys check in on my code number. You must be bored to death tracking Sam around the area. But anyway, you know, I would think with all of the trepidation going on relative to the budget and the end of the bottomless pit of money in Reno, Nevada, that more people would come down here to throw in their $25 million worth. Nobody's here, just Sam, once again, and of course staff over there. And I keep having to remind myself not to blame you necessarily for this terrible pickle that we're in that I've been warning you about for over 10 years. The media that's deathly afraid and dangerous and scared of Sam Dene, the media is the culprit. They're the culprit. If they had been reporting even 10% of the truth that Sam has been bringing to the podiums all of these years, and instead of being the go-to guy that Sam should be, they ignore him. They try to make believe that 10-ton elephant is not in the room when most people know he's there. Folks come up and say, Sam, I would like to come to some of those meetings, but I guess I don't really need to because you're telling them everything they need to know, and the media continues to ignore you. What would they do to just little old Fauntleroy coming in off of the street? By the way, it's you can check this out on YouTube also. Just look up Sam Dene Reno. You can even put in Steve Pitts, Chief of Police. You go right to a Sam Dene video on the YouTube. And you can put in Bob Cushell, mayor, current mayor, I should say, and any of your names, and you'll go straight to Sam Dene on YouTube. My adoring fans are asking me, being a little non sequitur maybe, my adoring fans are always asking me, Sam, when are they going to give you an award? When are they going to recognize your greatness? When are they going to name something after you? And they said, you know, one of the best things as a starter, they should name that kayaking course after you, Sam, that festival down there, because everybody knows that Sam was the only person who went to the podium all through the years recommending that course. The only person, not like 25 other citizens were in there. Sam was the one. So how about we call it Sam's Festival?
Thank you, sir. Having no other public comment cards, I'll bring it back to the table. Item B1, overview of proposed 2011-12 budget of Reno and Redevelopment Agency. Mr. Knudsen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Kevin Knudsen, Interim City Manager. Honorable Mayor and City Council, last Thursday we presented a budget that assumed concessions from employees this year and kept service levels the same for next year. We told you we'd return today with a different budget scenario that will show you what we'll have to change in order to balance the budget if we're unable to reach agreement with our bargaining units. The plan is developed to meet the entire shortfall that we have. Could you put the next slide, please? And what we did is we asked each department to look at what a 6% decrease in their department would represent. These are the hard dollar figures. The first column is what we asked them to look at cutting, and the second one is the plan that they actually came back with. As you can see, we are able to save slightly more than our total of target of $8,096,000 and have identified $8,164,000. The $2.5 million shortfall in the RDA fund we discussed last Thursday, we're going to use existing fund balance to get us through the first part of the year while we develop a plan to address the issues that are in the RDA. Each of the departments that are going to come up in the next few minutes are going to present the service impacts and the number of positions that each one of the departments would have to have removed in order to make this budget work. And they went through every single service that they have, and they looked at how they delivered services and which resources they applied to which programs, and did their best to find ways to reduce the impact on constituents. But to be fair, every single cut we make now is directly impacting somebody. There isn't a single program left in the city that isn't a vital one, and we know that, and we've done our best to try and find a way to give you cuts that have the least amount of impact. So what you're going to see today are different service and program cuts where we've tried to balance the needs of different constituencies. This budget represents a further staffing reduction of 55.65 positions, of which 25.65 are filled today. If you don't have any general questions, I'd like to move directly into the presentations by departments, and we're going to use the same order that we used on Thursday, so Ms. Conway will be our first speaker.
Good morning.
Julie Conway, Parks, Recreation, Community Services Director. And I will go right through this, and if you have any questions, feel free to ask me as I go through it. The reductions that we will have to propose, we have proposed to make to the city manager are the following. In the parks operation area, we would eliminate 2 positions. That would include the area in the park planning and the horticulturalist, and I have in the area there what kind of services would be reduced. What we would do is there are still services that are required, for example, in private development review, in residential construction tax reconciliation, that would have to be done. That would be transferred to the supervisor, and what we would propose to do would be to hire a part-time person to do the technical side of the work and respond directly to the supervisor and to backfill that. It would not fulfill the entire part of the job that would need to be done, nor would it do the technical side of the job, nor would it do the breadth and scope of the job. However, what it would do is to do the technical side, or the more support side of the job, and the supervisor would have to do just the core part of the work, and the majority of the job would not be done. So that's what we would eliminate, those 2 full-time positions. Then we would also need to eliminate in parks 3.65 full-time positions, and you see the array of services that we would propose to reduce there. And this would, at this point, we would propose to, it would further have a deterioration of our structural side of our park system, which would include the restrooms and picnic shelters and that type of thing. We would reduce our winter maintenance of our system and the snow removal of our system, and that is our proposal right now, and also our right-of-way maintenance. We do quite a bit of right-of-way maintenance that has been transferred to us, so we would reduce that as well. And in the administrative and cultural affairs, we're looking at eliminating, under the 6% proposal, one part-time administrative staff at our south side, and what we're looking at is consolidating our office areas, and most likely what we would do is move all of our staff into one part of the building and look at potentially leasing the other part of the building, and so that would help generate more revenue. And if this were to occur, we would attempt to try to generate more revenue and still look at how we can get some of the work done. This would most likely look at reducing some of the public hours, and we would combine our administrative office staff to be as efficient as possible. At the in the cultural affairs portion, again, this is a combined division. We would reduce some of the part-time administrative office support at McKinley Arts Center, and that would again reduce some of the public hours at McKinley. Remember that at McKinley Arts Center we have several leases there, so we would definitely not want to not have support there, because we support those lessees at that building, and we want to make sure that those leases are supported. They bring in and generate revenue for the city, and so we want to make sure that we have that covered. But this is the impact there. Under recreation, what we would do is, again, trying to minimize and mitigate the impact to the citizens. We would have to close Northwest Pool. We're looking at somewhere between 3 and 4 weeks, but and you'll hear this later in the presentation under CIP, we would look at using that time to be able to have the roof repair done at the same time. And we would do that hopefully at a time during low attendance. We have low attendance at certain times of the year, and so we would do that during a time of low attendance, and also we would have to have selected holiday breaks closed, and that would be during low attendance of holiday breaks to save money. In addition, we would need to close EMNECC Pool again, during the low attendance periods, and we would look at using that time to complete special maintenance projects. So it would be a opportune time to get special work done that's not, that we need to get done when people are not there. So that would be appropriate. Also, the closure of EM&ECC Center as a whole on Fridays. We track our attendance. That is a low participation day for the center as a whole. That would occur, we're proposing that would occur, but not the pool would be closed. So the pool would be open, but the center would be closed on Fridays. It would still be open for rentals, so we would still make money on the rentals, but the center would be closed on Fridays. We would propose eliminating a part-time inclusion tech. However, this would, under the 6% scenario reduction, we would still be able to support the Reno Access Advisory Committee. So that would not impact us supporting the Reno Access Advisory Committee operation. And then finally, we would propose a 2-week closure or earlier closure of Rink on the River. Primarily, we found that this year, especially with the river or the weather, that we increased our net proceeds, and we would probably do that on an ongoing basis. And we would want to do that if to reduce cost, and so we would reduce the part-time staff and everything associated with that. And that would be something definitely under a 6% scenario that we would do. Under youth and seniors, because definitely with youth and seniors, we have the operation of our buildings and also with our Sabayan Youth Center and our youth programs, we would need to reduce our hours of operation at Neal Road by about 25%. And what we would need to do is look at the lower use times when we don't have as much attendance. And so I wouldn't tell you right now whether that would be on a Saturday morning or a Friday night. And what I mean by that is we have the center open now, and it's just open whether there's 2 people there or whether 20 people come in. So what we would look at doing is converting it to a rental facility. It's always open for rentals, but it wouldn't necessarily be the doors would be open and there would be somebody at the front door, and people could just drop in. So what we would do is close the center. It would always be open for rentals, but not necessarily just the door. Somebody would be at the front door waiting for somebody to show up. So it would be, hours of operation would be reduced. We would reduce the office assistant, which is administrative support for the manager and the supervisors, which would reduce the ability for them to get the work done as you see there. And this would cause that position supports the Youth City Council as well. We would need to close the Sabayan Youth Center at this point at the 6% reduction, because that 6% would cut into the staffing of the Sabayan Youth Center and all that it takes to support that facility. And we would need to eliminate the senior outreach recreation leaders, which are 2 part-time positions. And that specifically, those 2 part-time positions help to go into the community and provide and identify and look at outreach and expand our outreach services. So they look and find expanded outreach, recreation, and wellness services. It does not impact full-time staff. It is 2 part-time position. And this also does discontinue support for the Senior Citizens Advisory Committee. And that concludes my presentation.
It's going to be overall, probably, as I looked at this morning, is I'd like to see a dollar figure on almost all these things in case, it doesn't come in that, if we're in the middle, what is it that we can look at?
We can provide that.
Okay. So provide that to everybody on these different ones, a dollar figure that goes along with it.
Absolutely.
Okay. Mr. Dortch.
Yeah, this is for Kevin. What is the deadline that we're giving our bargaining units on this, and when do we make the decision that this is the direction we're going?
At this point, the final decision is scheduled to be made on the 17th. That's an afternoon meeting where we have the public hearing for budget. You have the option of delaying that if necessary, but that is currently what we have planned.
Mr. Ashev.
This would be for Julie. On eliminating the inclusion tech, that's a part-time person, right?
Part-time person.
So April would still be able to support the RAC?
That's correct.
Right. And then on seniors, it says that are you going to, if you reduce the part-time office assistant
Let-
by,
If I can clarify that, April supports her goal or her job is to support the committee for the advisory committee for the RAC. And did you say seniors?
that's my next question.
Okay, okay.
And then, moving on to the senior portion of your presentation, you said you want to reduce the part-time office assistant by 50%?
Yes.
And that, therefore, there would be no grant writing as a result of that?
It would be reduced. The position right now is a 30-hour-a-week position, so it would be reduced to 10 hours a week. It has always been a 1560, as we refer to it, or 30 hours a week.
Right.
So we would reduce it to 10 hours a week.
Have
the
you
proposal.
quantified if they cannot spend time on grant writing, what that's going to cost us in grants?
I'd have to look to Daryl. The goal here is that position supports the supervisor and the manager in getting those grants out. That person doesn't write the grants, but all of that is a support for the managers. I don't know if we can actually put a dollar amount on it. Is that something you could put a dollar amount on? No, can't really put a dollar amount on it, but that is a support position that helps to get the grants out. So
Does that mean we're going to lose grants because we won't be able to timely write them?
Potentially. So we could, add, if you add 20 hours or add 10 hours to it, that would help.
Well, so we don't have to do that right now because I know we need to move on. I'd like to see something from
Right.
you that indicates, what traditionally we've gotten in grants in the past and what potentially may be at risk if
Right.
we do this.
Okay, and we can provide the dollar amount as Councilor Ayazi requested, so you can know what that position is worth.
Correct.
Right.
That's all I have, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, any other, Ms. Frazza?
Yeah, Julie, in the presentation, which restrooms would be closed?
I can ask Jeff. I'll let him respond to that.
Jeff Mann, Parks Manager. We haven't identified the specific restrooms. They would be those at parks which do not have athletic fields and are not rental facilities.
Can we get that list before wrap-up? And then I have the same question for the playgrounds and restrooms. You said close those playgrounds or restrooms rather than repair. Do you know which ones those were?
That would be on an as-needed basis, depending on the repairs that would be needed at any given point during the year.
Can
At
you
some point,
identify those and get us a list of those as well?
Well, there isn't a current list. What I'm saying is that as a playground or as a restroom becomes damaged during the year, we might not have the ability to repair it, so it would become closed. I can't tell you what that is right now because it's something that it will likely happen in the future.
Okay, has staff identified those facilities that there's the potential of that happening?
Well, every facility has that potential. I mean, any playground could be damaged through vandalism, or any restroom could be damaged through vandalism, or just normal wear and tear.
Okay, and then the right-of-way maintenance, where would that be?
We're currently on a once every 7 to 8 week schedule for right-of-way maintenance. When we had it contracted out several years ago, it was once a week. Now we're at 7 to 8 weeks.
So would this be an elimination altogether of the right-of-way maintenance?
No, it would be decreased even further.
Can we get a list of what those are, please?
Yes.
And then on the, I guess this question for Daryl, on the youth city council, what's the funding level support for that now, Daryl?
Daryl Feemster, Youth and Senior Services Division Manager. The Youth City Council now has a budget of $5,000 that they utilize to support community projects and activities. And then the support for advising them has just been my office assistant and myself.
So, under this scenario, that proposal is to cut that completely?
Yes.
And then, Daryl, there were other youth services. I was confused in the memo a little bit. You talked about the division discontinuing after-school programs at the following sites, and there's several of them, Bernice Martin Matthews location, a lot of these here, and the teen programs as well. Is that under the worst-case scenario?
Actually, the 4 sites that are listed there were discontinued as of the 10-11 fiscal year.
Okay, so we don't have a program at Bernice Matthews?
No, we do not. The
So
school district currently operates that
in this
program.
memo here, is that taken into account with what we've already done or what's proposed to be done?
In the 6% proposal, that includes the impacts of the 10-11 budget as it was, the 11-12 budget that it was submitted on Friday. The 11-12 6% proposal were the items that are listed now.
Okay, so the partnership with Boys and Girls Club, that's discontinued, or
That is a part of the 6%, I'm sorry.
So that's what I'm trying to figure out. You guys put this all in together. What is the proposal for the 6% and what has already been done?
The 6%, the 25% reduction at Neal Road Recreation Center, and the 50% part-time staff, that impacts, and the closing of Sabayan, impacts the teen program that we do in partnership with the Boys and Girls Club, and it impacts the closing of Sabayan Recreation Center.
So is that being proposed
That's
with the
proposed
6?
as the 6%, yes.
Okay, so that would be in the worst-case scenario.
Correct.
And then what about the Reno Idol event and the rest, what you listed in this memo on 5-6? Is that in the 6%?
Those items would be impacted if the Youth City Council is eliminated. Last year, the Youth City Council did not fund Reno Idol because of their budget reduction. They chose to utilize those revenues that they had for different programs. I would believe if Youth City Council was reinstated at 5,000, then Reno Idol again would probably not be done. The item that they currently use the majority of their funding for now is a project at the beginning of the fiscal year where they take in homeless youth and feed them lunch and give them backpacks for school. That's what the majority of their 5,000 has gone for the last 2 years.
Okay. Thank you, Daryl.
Ms. Edra.
Julie, can you explain more specifically with the reduction of the 2 part-time positions for the senior outreach, what activities will be remaining in the senior program?
And I'll call Daryl up here to help me with this. That will be reliant on our existing our full-time person to have the time to go out and be able to collaborate with the county, which we still will do. And what we'll focus on is keeping Neal Road open, and that will be our focus, is keeping Neal Road open. Without a part-time staff, that person helps to go out in the outreach in the community with our other partners that we have, with the hospital and many, many others. And that person helps bring those individuals in that partner at Neal Road. So the focus will then to be keep Neal Road programmed and Neal Road open, and that will be the focus for the full-time person. So if you want to add to that, that's a broad statement. So what programs might we lose?
And Daryl Feemster again, Youth and Senior Services Manager. The majority of the programs and services that we would no longer be able to provide involve partnerships with outside organizations and agencies. And again, Amber Martin, the Recreation Supervisor Senior Liaison, goes out and develops these partnerships, but then it's the part-time staff that we currently have at Neal Road that kind of administer the scheduling and all of those aspects of those different things. So a lot of the senior safety classes, music classes, a lot of those types of activities would have to be discontinued. And I would say that we do senior computer classes, we do different arts and crafts. Some of those will remain, the majority would be discontinued.
Would it be reasonable to expect or request that some of that could be provided by volunteers? We have some very knowledgeable and committed members who are on the Senior Advisory Committee, some who've served over their time and have since left, but may be willing to come back, that have just a tremendous amount of institutional knowledge. Could they pick up the pieces? I mean, does it have to be finality of these will not happen, or is there a way that volunteer effort could help support those?
Again, you are the city council. You are who I'm responsible to answer to. So if you said there are things that must continue, they would continue, but they would continue at the expense of something else not happening. We currently use an extensive amount of volunteers to operate Neal Road, and it takes staff to manage volunteers. We don't have the staff to manage the volunteers.
But if we had one senior volunteer that has the ability to supervise for you, if we could find that type of an individual.
I mean, anything is possible, yes.
Thank you.
Is the Sabayan Center, I thought we had a lease with somebody on that.
We
And you're
do
gonna
have a
close it?
20-year, $1 a year lease to utilize the Sabayan Recreation Center.
Do we lose it if we close it?
We could continue to pay the lease and do something with the facility,
I
but
thought we had another group in there doing something.
we now have several groups that are operating with us, attempting to provide services for youth. But again, the services that we provide are currently minimal in attracting youth to the facilities in order to take advantage of the services offered, again, by the outside agencies. It's similar to the Neal Road Recreation Center. Several of the services that we provide there, we don't provide. We just provide the facility and the staffing and the organization of the event. But then we have outside agencies that come in and provide the direct service to the customer.
Those will continue?
At Neal Road and at
No, I'm
Sabayan,
talking
both of
about
them,
Sabayan.
those services would not continue because there is not staff to open the
But
facility.
even though you have somebody that's doing it,
We have someone that communicates with our recreation supervisor in our teen program and says, can we come and talk to your teens about drug or violence or whatever the case may be? And our teen supervisor and our recreation leaders say, yeah, we'll collect 25 kids if you
Okay.
want to come and talk to them.
okay, they don't do that.
Correct.
Julie Conway, Parks and Recreation Services Director, as I might have alluded to at the prior meeting, we're the foundation for the Sabayan Center. We provide the staffing, and then they come in and tag on to the staffing that we provide, to open the door and to provide the ongoing staffing to be there. That's the services the city provides. We have yet to find someone in this economy to be there, to keep the doors open and provide the staffing, the security, if you will, keep the lights on.
Okay.
We've yet to find somebody, a nonprofit, to do that, and we've
Okay.
looked for somebody to do that, to take our place. And that's who we're trying
Okay,
to find.
That's good. Any other questions?
And Mr. Mayor, may I just add, at Sabayan, it's very interesting. We actually spend $1 a year for the facility. That's it. We don't pay rent. We don't pay power. We don't have any of those additional expenses. The expense that this council has provided for has been the staff that works with the youth.
And how many staff people are you talking about?
We are currently talking 1 supervisor and 3 recreation leaders is what is in the proposed cut that you're looking at.
Okay, we'll look at it.
Yeah.
Okay. Any others? Mr. Isaac?
One quick follow-up on the grant writing from Councilman Hashef. Do we have a list of how much grants we received last year and the year before?
Absolutely.
And so I think that's what we need. You said you couldn't quantify that amount, but I think that would help. It's just how much have we gotten in the past?
And again, it's difficult to quantify because we will attempt to get those done. But as you know, they all have deadlines and timelines, and if we're responding to questions from
What he's
parents
asking
and
for is what
seniors,
you've gotten in the past
what we've
and
done
what
in
you're
the
applying
last year,
for, and furnish us
yes,
that,
we can
please.
absolutely provide
Okay,
that.
thank you. We have a couple people who speak. Donna Clontz.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council. My name is Donna Klontz. I serve on the Senior Citizens Advisory Board for the City of Reno and have for the last year or so. I'm a volunteer that has spent years working on various senior issues in the community along with several other folks. And listening to some of your questions and concerns, I know that we have some talented volunteers, but without the backbone of some minimal staff that are responsible for these very important programs for thousands and thousands of seniors in our communities, those programs will go away, and we'll lose the positive benefit that so many seniors get from just daily participation in recreation and educational programs that the City of Reno is kind of a synergy to create. It's not just the city staff that are doing that, but it's the relationships that have been built over the years that will fall if the city's key people are no longer there. So I urge you, I know it's very tough times, you've got some very hard decisions to make, but we as volunteers will fill in where we can, but even we as volunteers don't have the full-time staff time to give to these particular programs. We know how important they are, and we urge you to keep this if you can as you go through this process.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Stephen Jacobs.
I am Stephen Jacobs. I'm chairperson of the Senior Citizens Advisory Committee. And I want to thank you for the opportunity to speak. I hope that negotiations with the unions are fruitful on everybody's part, and so that further cuts don't have to be made. Senior programs have grown and the number of participants has increased dramatically over the last few years. They provide, Parks and Recreation provides a valuable adjunct to services which the county provides, and we work very closely together. I cannot envision how these programs could continue without at least the current level of staffing and without the dedication and hard work of that staff. And I don't see a future for the committee if we're left without anybody to, any resources that we have now. So I hope that you take this into account in future budgeting. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Sam Dene. There's something Sam could do.
Sam Dene, a Reno citizen, and I wanted to speak just on the overview of the budgets, generally speaking, items B2. I'm not going to be able to stay very long because all of this conversation is just too brutal, too ugly. It's churning my stomach when I think back through the years of how I came to these podiums and warned you about all of this stuff going on. But there is one thing that my friends and I cannot figure out. According to the media, all of these wonderful functions that we have in the community, from the baseball stadium to Cabela's to Art Town to Hot August Night, Street Vibrations, air races, according to the media, those things are increasing their attendance every year. Now, where is that money going? Where's the money going that's coming in that should be increasing according to what the media says? The money's coming in, and yet there doesn't seem to be enough money to continue along the way we've been going. And I'm not saying that salaries might not be bloated, especially the ones at the city council, but there's just a disconnect here that doesn't make any real sense. By the way, I've been volunteering my musical talents to the community for charity for over 10 years. My partner, Indiana Tommy Clark, retired Reno police legend, we've been volunteering ourselves. I don't know, you hear there are so many volunteers out there, and I'm hoping that all of those volunteers are volunteering for free, because I've heard of some volunteers, they come up and says, oh no, I get paid here and I get paid that, I get paid to do that. So a volunteer should be, by the term itself, should be free. I don't know if you might want to look in to find out if these volunteers are all actually for free. I guess what I'm thinking about all of these wonderful increases in the capabilities of our special events, all I'm thinking, for instance, is the baseball stadium, for one thing. Is there a lot of scavenging going on? Are they taking people away from other parts of town to go to the baseball function or to the art town or all those? So those other places aren't able to pay taxes because nobody's going there, or fewer people are going there. So the scavenging is taking place to pay for all of these other things, because that's where the people are going. As I said, this is just really, really terrible. And I just have to, and I don't want to say I told you so, but back in the days of Andy the Magician Green and Charles the Wizard McNeely, I would come to the podium and say, I don't know when we're ever going to run out of money, because Andy the Magician Green always finds a bottomless pit of money. And sure enough, the bottomless pit has been found, and apparently there isn't any money there. And it really is sad to hear all of these things. As I close out, here was what I would do if I was the mayor, or if I was even a city council member, which I should be if we had an honest voting system. I would take a 25% pay cut right now. Then I would have the bully pulpit to talk to all of the other hardworking people. I would do that for 1 year.
Thank you very much. Ms. Fezza.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, just one more question for staff. I don't know if this would be for Jody. On the CDBG funding, and I'm looking at the allocations from the staff report, and I realize there's a cap on human services. Is there a potential of transferring out of one of these categories to youth and senior services?
The public services cap, you can allocate that funding to whatever public services you would like. Previously, we had been directed to, council had indicated they wanted to fund some of the Human Services Consortium grantees, and then we have the commitment to the Community Assistance Center budget as well. So it looks like you could choose the Human Services Consortium or Youth and Senior Services.
I understand that, and that's plugged into the budget, but I guess what I'm asking is, out of some of these other programs, like neighborhood revitalization, for example?
No, we're at the cap of where we can go, even with the regulations allowing us to go up to our 1982 or 83 proportion of funds.
And I saw that, but like neighborhood revitalization, if we were to pick those, I mean, some of the target areas are exactly the areas where you're talking about eliminating those services for seniors. Neal Road, for example, Northeast Community Center. I mean, would it be prudent to do some analysis to see if some of that funding could be targeted in those areas to help the seniors and youth, because that would have a detrimental effect within those neighborhoods?
Councilmember, we can target them to those areas. We couldn't use them for those services, because even though it's under the neighborhood revitalization program, there's a type of activity that has to be undertaken with those dollars. If we provided services, it would still count under the public service cap. So if we funded something at the Zabayan Center, it would still be a public service, even though it was done under the neighborhood revitalization program. So the other would have to be reduced.
Because at one point in time last budget, we were talking about graffiti. Potentially having transferring that particular person within the neighborhood revitalization program.
Correct, because they would be doing more infrastructure type stuff, because it's with a physical plant rather than an actual service that they're providing. So you're talking about maintaining and reducing blight is how we would have captured that within the HUD regulations. It would have been a blight reduction activity, not the service activity.
Okay, thank you.
All right, any other comments right now? Okay, yes.
Mr. Mayor.
Mr.
Again,
Asher.
just for staff when they get back to us, I need more information, particularly on this inclusion tech. What programs are we actually going to lose, and how much is that part-time position, so I can look at, you know, what programs we're sacrificing versus if we did keep that person in, what programs could we save? And the same thing with the senior outreach rec leaders. I know you're proposing to eliminate 2, but if we kept 1, I mean, what music programs and other outreach would we be able to salvage if we kept 1 part-time person? And I looked at the sheet that you gave us before, and that gives us an indication of who we serve and how many we serve. It's not clear to me, are we going to lose all the music classes if we eliminate these 2 positions? Or are we just going to reduce them? And are there other programs we're just going to reduce as opposed to eliminate?
Julie Conway, Parks and Recreation Community Services Director. What I can tell you about the inclusion techs is they support, because we work cross-departmentally or inside the department, they support the youth program and help Daryl's programs and help the youth that come into that program and assess those youth who are developmentally disabled, and they help make sure those youth are taken care of when they integrate within our programs. So I'll leave it at that. We'll get the information back to you.
Yeah, because we've actually had testimony from very concerned parents at the RAC that if we eliminated those positions, their kids have no other place to go, really. So I like to know the number of people that we're serving, obviously, if we eliminate that position, and what programs we would be eliminating as a result of losing
We
that.
still have kept some positions,
Right.
but not having, if we go to this 6%,
Right.
it would cut deeper and we would have to lessen the service.
Right.
But we still have kept some inclusion techs.
Okay.
Okay, I'm on Chief of Police, Mr. Pitts.
Good morning, Honorable Mayor and Council. Steve Pitts on behalf of the Reno Police Department. I will just be speaking briefly on the budget, but before I get started, we got over to Council this morning before the meeting formally began. There were several questions about the series of robberies and the homicide we had, the robbery and homicide we had on California Avenue this weekend. And this morning at 2 o'clock, we arrested 4 individuals for that robbery series, which included 2 robberies here, 3 in Carson City, and a homicide in our jurisdiction. So,
good job.
And absolutely, they did a great job. And we would probably ask this council's consideration maybe in about a month, once the victim's family gets through the next couple of weeks, to recognize him for his attempt to intervene in that robbery and protect those 2 individuals that were being robbed, and unfortunately he was killed as a result of that.
More than happy to.
Thank you, sir. What you see in front of you, ladies and gentlemen, is a 6% reduction in the Reno Police Department's budget. You can see that Mr. Knudsen pointed out it's about $3.1 million as far as the money goes for us. The impacts we'll see at this 6%, we'll have to reduce 2 CSO positions. We will continue to hold 31 sworn police officer positions. That means we will not be hiring or backfilling any new officers in any police or sworn positions at the Reno Police Department. We'll look at the closure of the only remaining open substation, which is at Neal Road. That's a significant hit for us because that community is somewhat geographically displaced from our main station downtown, and it predominantly services our Hispanic community. We'll continue to analyze, obviously, our calls for service and our priorities through the alternative reporting method system we use. Will transfer 20 sworn positions to patrol from detectives, gang enforcement, and traffic enforcement. I'll get into some of those numbers in the follow-up slide. The repeat offender program and our street enforcement teams. So we continue to keep our patrol division stronger. You've heard me talk about this over the last year and a half. We want a strong, proactive, responsive patrol division, and it's a safe place for them to work, and they're highly effective in the community. And you'll see some impacts to that, and I'll speak about that just briefly. In the column to your left, we had discussed some of these things last week, ladies and gentlemen. The column to your right are predominantly responses to questions coming from Mr. Ferrazza, and I'll get into that. But as you know, we reorganized the Reno Police Department in June of last year and put some 200 to 205 people in the patrol division, and where we're at roughly today with the retirements and the reduction in force, as you'll see on the fourth bullet, we're at about 180 police officers as we continue to downsize our support units. Those reductions, as you can see from detectives, is about a 30% reduction, 54 detectives to 38, traffic enforcement about a 46% reduction, 41 traffic enforcement and education officers down to 22, and our patrol will stand at about 180 police officers, about a 10% reduction. The loss of the 2 CSO positions will transfer, because we'll probably keep the remaining 4 CSOs in traffic enforcement or parking enforcement and work on those things. It'll transfer that workload and handle those reports and other things to police officers in the field. In the right column, I'll just touch on those things real quick. There were questions from council last week about our calls for service. As you can see, the emergencies in progress calls about 2.2%. Priority 1's about 49, almost close to 48%. Priority 2's 26.8, and priority 3 is about 23.3%. The community action, I think this is important. There was a question, I believe it was from Mr. Ferrazza last week, about what are some of the things we've done fairly well in the community with respect to community action. Of course, the Pat Baker Park community action story speaks for itself. We've continued to see a 60% reduction in calls for service in that neighborhood. At the CAC, we service some 260 individuals, displaced families in what we called Tent City, and it's down to 8. I can tell you that the numbers we got, at least that I got last week from Ms. Piccolini, our budget analyst, is we provided trips back home to about 211 people from Tent City, and I think that's probably a record for the Reno Police Department. And we worked with the city manager's office, and we used some asset forfeiture funds to make sure that got done. Our mobile outreach team, Mr. Pat O'Brien's baby, they're servicing about 100 individuals a month. Southwest Village at 3295 South Virginia. That was a very high volume calls for service and really property crime location for us. We've seen a 45% reduction in calls for service there just recently. And Community Gardens on the north side of our town in Ward 3, another very high calls for service location. We've seen about a 26% reduction in calls for service. And Diamond Creek, which is down south in Double Diamond, we experienced some 160 roughly calls for service a month at one time, and we've seen a 30% reduction there. So the community action efforts of the community action team and obviously our police officers in the field are working. When you look at UCR, which specifically deals with crime, what we see right now, persons crimes in Reno is down about 20%. The national average is 6. Property crimes is about 15.4%. with a national average of 3. And the factors that we push up against this are the crime-fighting efforts of the Reno Police Department, the problem-solving I just talked about in the community action piece, and population displacement. When we look at information in our community that we weigh against crime and community problems, we see that there's somewhat of an incredible displacement of some of the population seeking jobs. And then, of course, some reporting barriers. I'll take any questions. That's all I have.
Any questions right now of the chief? Mr. Azzi.
Just two, when you talk about
Sure.
the crime reporting, are we above the national average as far as the crimes? This just shows the reduction, that we're above the national average on reduction, but what are we on the national average of just crimes? If you see what I'm saying.
That's a good question, sir. If you accumulated all those, I think we're at about less than 16%, so we're below.
And so the national average is higher than that?
Yes,
So I
sir.
want to know. And then sort of an off-the-wall question. A couple of years ago, we did the false alarm ordinance.
Yes, sir.
Has that helped? Has that worked?
It's helped with reducing calls for service. There are some options we have provided the city manager's office to improve the reduction in calls for service, but there's some revenue factors that need to be weighed against that, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Haship?
I have a similar question. Can you identify why we have so many calls of service at some of these locations? Does it have anything to do with the owner of the property? In other words,
With respect to these right here, sir?
yeah, or anything else you do, similar to the false alarm ordinance that we enacted. We did that in part to change the behavior of folks that continually just didn't take care of their alarm system, and the police department was constantly going out there. And at least from what I've seen over the years, that's helped. The ordinance has helped try to control some of that behavior. If we did something similar where you have high volumes of calls for service at certain properties, and we can attribute that to the owner of the property not doing certain things, would something similar to the false alarm ordinance work to control that kind of behavior?
It would, sir. Actually, to revisit two things we are doing very closely with code enforcement is the social host ordinance, and I have to tell you, code enforcement has worked very closely with us. They've taken the lead on a lot of that, and we've made a significant difference there in those calls. And then, of course, the crime-free multi-housing, where we provide education to apartment complexes, and those impact calls for service. But we can look at other approaches. Maybe there could be some national models we haven't looked at, and we could apply those here at the Reno Police Department.
What about charging a fee? If someone, is not
It's true.
controlling their property and what goes on in their property, being able to have some kind of an assessment to at least reimburse the police department.
We'll take a look at that, sir.
Mr. Fraser?
Yeah, Chief, do we have, in these 6% cuts, do we have the graffiti unit?
We have a full-time person. That's an excellent question. Thank you. We just talked about it in staff this morning. About 3 months ago, when we came in actually in January, we were talking about budget for obviously the end of 10-11. We had lost that full-time position. We were operating the abatement vehicle part-time. We have filled that with a full-time operator, and they are making a difference. I don't have the numbers
Yeah.
today, ma'am, but they are making a difference.
Yeah, and I mean, I was getting a ton of emails. Now that's dropped off, but I just wanted to make sure it was preserved in next year's budget, because I think we saw that spike, and then I think that leads to more graffiti issues in the area.
Yes, ma'am.
So, and I guess the question for Jody, is that something that we can take out the neighborhood revitalization program, that funding that you have in the category, similar to what we do with code enforcement? Because I want to make sure that that position does stay. I think it's extremely important for the community.
Councilwoman Sferza, Jody Rowe Goodwin, for the record. You're asking if we can use the Neighborhood Revitalization Program funds for a staff member for the graffiti?
Correct.
We cannot use it for a staff member. We can use it for the supplies and those types of operating costs.
Okay. And then, Chief, on the, with these reductions, it includes the traffic enforcement team,
Yes, ma'am.
a reduction there. Have you gotten together with the courts? Because to me, that impacts the caseload with the courts as well. I mean, is there a corresponding decrease then on their side?
Actually, Matt Fisk may be able to speak to that, but I spoke to Judge Howard and Matt last week during the council meeting outside, and we've actually seen an increase in activity on the traffic side. I can't answer for that right away. I know we've made some shifts in our traffic enforcement and education strategy, and I told Judge Howard we would work directly with them on the other factors that he spoke about last week.
Okay, I guess we'll ask that question when we get to the courts. And then one final question, Mr. Mayor. What is the crime rate, Chief? Just following up on Councilman Ayazi, when I asked the question last week, we've seen a decrease, and you talked about some of the reporting barriers.
Yes, ma'am.
Which concerns me a little, because we're not going out now taking standard reports. We have a lot of those online for accidents and those types of things. Do you know what the rate is in our area?
For, ma'am?
The crime rate. I mean, if you put the crime rate, I mean, in years past, we've gotten the crime rate. Do you know what that is?
Well, I want to say that the combined, if you look at property crimes and persons crimes compared against the national average, and I think that might have been what Mr. Ozzie was asking, I believe we're between 15 and 16% reduction. This is a challenge you're seeing across the country, and you could say, well, that's a good thing. But it's a challenge that chiefs are seeing, law enforcement agencies across this country, with the displacement of population seeking jobs, is you're seeing this crime rate reduce geographically somewhat tremendously. The question now is, will it begin to increase? And will we be prepared to deal with that? So.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions, anybody? Thank you very much.
I'd just like to close with one comment. I appreciate the council's support of the Reno Police Department, and I have to guarantee you that we want to provide the most effective and progressive service to this community we can. And in light of Police Memorial Week, which you'll hear about on Wednesday, the mayor has approved a proclamation, is, we've seen about a 43% increase in violent assaults, fatal violent assaults on policemen in this country. And so the safety of our people, as you heard the president say last night on 60 Minutes, is absolutely a priority. Thank you.
Well, Chief, thank you. And on the Friday, Chief, we're turning the lights blue for all of our fallen police officers nationwide. The council did. Oh, Chief.
Good morning. On behalf of the Reno Fire Department, Michael Hernandez, Fire Chief. You have before you a snapshot summary of the city manager's requested budget cuts and what those impacts will mean. Our target goal was $2,365,000. We've met that via the following reductions in services and supplies. We're anticipating a $248,000 reduction, and I'll have a detail on that. Current, existing, and vacant positions remain frozen for a savings of $773,000. You're looking at a 7.5% salary reduction for unrepresented individuals within the organization. That's a grand total of 2 people, myself and the senior management analyst, Michelle Hobbs. And unfortunately, in order to meet the goal, we are looking at a reduction in force of full-time equivalents of approximately 14 individuals. This represents a 37% reduction from our 09-10 line staff position. Regarding services and supplies, specifically that'll come from legal services, a reduced contribution to the Regional Training Center participation fee, vehicle parts and supplies, significant shop lease rental reduction, personnel protective equipment, and capital equipment purchases. Regarding the vacant positions, currently we do have 5 that remain open, and you see the line items specifying those positions. And again, as mentioned, the unrepresented, myself and senior management analyst, represent the $24,060. And again, the most significant portion of the reduction equates to the 14 full-time equivalents, 14 firefighters. That includes their severance payout. And what that specifically means to the organization and to the community, the next slide shows where we were in 08-09. We had approximately 23 engine companies when we began browning out to meet our reduced budget, to our current level of 18 engine companies. With this reduction, this proposed reduction, we would have to eliminate or permanently close an additional fire station. Plan A that was presented last week constituted the labor groups coming forth and meeting a proposed recommendation from the city manager that would keep us at an even keel of where we currently are now. This plan encompasses a 6% reduction, which would mean we would basically lose a fire station. We'd go down from 18 engines in service at any given time to approximately 7. And there is the possibility, depending on our staffing levels, of an additional brownout or a reduction at one of our multi-company stations.
7 or 17?
17, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Currently, we have 72 people assigned per shift. This would bring us down to approximately 67 people per shift. Currently, we have 216 assigned on the line. We would be down to 202. What this equates to, Mr. Mayor, is increased response times. Whenever we would respond to a multi-alarm incident, it would definitely stressed the system. As an example, several weeks back on a Saturday, we had high winds. We had a structure fire off of Holcomb Ranch Road. We had approximately 8 engines and one truck company there, which in essence took almost every engine out of the city to save that structure, which we did. It was an attic fire in a relatively large home. Between the wind, accessibility, it was a challenge. It was a challenge for the organization. Large-scale events, wildfire season, multi-alarm events, high-rise fires, we're going to be impacted. We're at a point where we have no bench, so to speak. We've got our depth of resources is being diminished. And of course, there are impacts to the interlocal agreement, as Councilman Ayazi is fully aware of, and we are currently in the process of finishing up negotiations to that. So I am, as I've told council before, I'm an optimist by nature, but I'm a professional pessimist by profession. I'm holding out the highest level of hope that we can reach some type of consensus with the labor groups to avoid this reduction in force. You know, we average anywhere from a high of 14 significant fires or structure fires a month to a low. We had 4 last month, so we had a quiet month. However, we did have some what I would consider an extremely positive event. We did rescue an individual from a hotel. His room was on fire, and our crews entered the room and were able to effect the rescue and save his life. This year is not. We haven't started off well. On New Year's Day, we had a 1 fire fatality. Within the city of Reno, we've had 2 in the Truckee Meadows district. So it's a challenge. It's a challenge for the organization. It's a challenge for me as the fire chief. You know, I've got multiple balls in the air that I'm trying to balance, and my focus remains keeping the highest level of service to the community as possible. We, within the Reno Fire Department, do the best we can with the resources we have, but we're getting thin. We're getting thin. I'll take any questions.
Much increase in response times are you looking at?
I can certainly run those numbers for you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay,
but as we brown out stations, the districts get larger, obviously, and it could be anywhere from a 2 to 4 minute increase to a 6 to a 10 minute increase. It just depends on which station we brown out.
What is equipped in each fire station? What kind of equipment's in each fire station that
Most
you
of
have open?
most of the fire stations have typically an engine company. The outlying stations have an engine company and a water tender. Because of the geographic locations of some of the outlying areas, they do not have hydrants. We do have brush rigs, where if we do have a wildland fire, the crews will literally get off the fire truck and climb onto a brush rig that's specially equipped to handle the wildland interface, the brush and the.
What's in the station on 4th Street?
We have a truck company. We have a rescue apparatus, and we have an engine company. Part of our brownout plan includes, as we drop down in our staffing, we strive to keep a truck company available for the downtown high-rise area, and depending on our staffing, you'll always have a truck company. And if our staffing drops, we will reduce that engine to a rescue rig, which is the other vehicle that you see there. And oftentimes, you'll see both of those rigs responding to EMS calls. But again, we have a flexible staffing plan depending on our availability of staff, and it goes up and down. As an example, today we have no overtime. We have Station 21, which is at the Grand Sierra. It will be open for probably 6 to 8 hours this morning. We have some folks taking off. That station will be browned out for approximately 4 to 6 hours, and then it'll come back up later in the evening throughout the rest of the night. So,
what equipment's over there?
At Station 21, we have an engine company and a rescue rig.
Yes.
Yeah, Chief, on the reduction in force, the 14, does that include the 4 that we brought back?
Well, that does not. No.
Because we're not funded for those 4 also.
After
so
we're
so
projecting.
It'd be 18?
I'm sorry?
So it'd be 18?
18 positions? Well, technically, yes, because we have not reached a consensus with the association regarding the funding of those 4 positions, and those positions are only funded through the end of this budget year.
Right. So there'd be 18.
So Does that have additional impacts other than what you've proposed to us?
Well, right now, our current plan is with the staffing that we have, so it wouldn't impact our existing brownout plan. But again, our staffing model is such that it's based on a percentage of employees that are eligible to be that are eligible to take off. And again, as a good example, today we had very few employees taking off. We're able to stand up more stations. Depending on the time of year, the season, if everyone takes their time off, then we would have to brown out an additional station. So, and right now, frankly, we're looking at we're going to run some numbers, but we're frankly running out of stations to brown out. We're looking at possibly Station 4 up by the university, and Station 8 up on Kings Row. So it's.
What do we have for equipment on Robb Drive?
Rob, just an engine.
Just an engine?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Any other questions, Mr. President?
Chief, what station under this scenario would be closed?
Right now, we were looking at, I was talking with the command staff this morning. Of course, we'd have to analyze the least amount of, call volume, density, population threat, and risk. But again, as an example, in Councilmember Zadra's district, she's got one station on the east side of 395. So we're down to about 2 stations. And again, it's Station 4.
Which is which one?
By the university.
Okay.
And then Station 8 up on Kings Row. And again, we're at the deck, so to speak. We're running out of stations to close, brown out.
Could those rescue units be moved to some of them we browned out?
We could, but that doesn't speak to the fire threat, sir. And again, even I have that capability now, and I struggle to stand up those rescue rigs with the personnel that I have. So it's a challenging time.
Chief, on the 1.3, you said the savings includes severance payout. Does that include unemployment compensation as well?
I'm going to look at Gayla. Gayla? No, ma'am.
So if you put in unemployment compensation, how does that change that number?
The number for the fire department, so sorry, Gayla from OMB.
Can't
The number
hear
for the
you.
fire department is not coming on? Okay. Okay. The number for the fire department doesn't include unemployment, but we do have unemployment budgeted under the Human Resources Department, and we should have enough there for at least some of these potential retirements or RIFs.
Well, I mean, I think that should be included so we know what that overall cost is, because that's not a true cost savings then if you have unemployment in the mix. I think our PPA brought that up the last time we went through this. There is a cost associated with doing that, number one. Number two, on the vacant frozen positions, it says 5 vacancies to remain open, Chief. Aren't some of those contractual, whether they remain open or not?
Yes, ma'am. We've got 2 labor groups. The Local 731 does not have any specific numbers regarding positions and number of positions to be maintained. The RFDAA, the Chief Officers Group, does specify a specific number of chief officers and an EMS manager, and we've currently got 2 vacancies that we have not filled, that they have not required us to fill.
So
Or
out of
not
the
asked us to
5, 3 would be in RFDDA 2, and they've agreed for how long during this fiscal year, Chief?
I'd have to go back to the note.
Brett?
I think it's through the end of this fiscal year, and there's some language in the side letter that speaks to extending that out, but that would be an RFDAA discussion with the city manager.
So I want to make sure I understand this. So that takes us through the end of this fiscal year. Is that agreed upon for 11-12? Do we have that agreed upon? I don't recall doing that. I recall doing it for this fiscal year, but not for next fiscal year.
As I'm going from memory because I don't have the letter in front of me, but I believe that there was language that allowed it to continue on if both parties agreed.
Okay.
So.
But we haven't had both parties agree. So again, that's another assumption in this budget where I don't think we should be putting things in the budget until we have
Definitive.
definitive information. And then the third question I have on the 1.3 million, does that include, is that the entirety of the savings to the city of Reno, or is that the overall savings which Truckee Meadows would benefit from?
I think that's specifically to Reno, because the Truckee Meadows contribution is a separate calculation that is paid to Reno.
Michelle, can you
wanna
answer
speak to
that?
For the record, Michelle Hubb, Senior Management Analyst, Reno Fire. The reduction in staff proposed would only be on the Reno side. As the interlocal goes forward, Truckee Meadows has a set level of staffing numbers. It's roughly 63 positions going forward. This 14 does not impact any of that set level for the Truckee Meadows stations.
Okay. And just a comment.
Can I follow up on
Yeah.
that? But that still proposes that they give us what
Exactly.
our share is, because they still get reduced by a third of this by contract goes to them.
If we go forward with the interlocal agreement on July 1st, we'll have a new actual cost methodology
Right.
where they will pay specifically for their positions. The percentages that they've done in the past with the 26 to 28% they've paid in the overall budget will change significantly. They'll actually pay for the specific set amount of positions to staff their stations.
But I think what she's getting to is that's not in place now. In fact, they're threatening to pull, and if they pull out of the agreement, a third of this, or 25%, 26%, still goes to them.
If they decide not to agree with the interlocal agreement and we go back to the existing methodology, there's conversations regarding what they would actually pay for. As we've defined this new actual cost methodology, we've found a lot of differences in what should have been paid, what was paid. We'd like to go forward with the actual cost methodology. If we continue for one more year, goes to the fair and equitable model. It would be in the city's best interest to go with that fair and equitable model, to have them pay specifically for the staff positions to staff their stations, not to go back to the old methodology that just assumes that they pay a certain percentage of the overall budget, which then, you're correct, Councilwoman, they would pay a reduced amount from the savings that Reno has attained.
But that's the way it is right now.
That's the way it is right now.
So for today's budget, we only see 75% of the savings without approval or agreement with the county, Board of County Fire Commissioners.
We would have to come to an agreement for going forward for 11-12. For the current year, you're absolutely correct. Any savings we've had this year, we also worked last year to do a fair and equitable true-up, that if we took savings when we did a reduction in force on only the Reno side, and the Truckee Meadow stations weren't impacted at all with their level of service, we did not attribute those savings to them, so they didn't get savings back at the end of the contract for those positions that were just Reno only.
But we still haven't trued up our RIFs for this, so we're still
You're
in
correct.
negotiations for the true-ups to try to balance this year's budget.
Correct. We're still working on the true-up
Correct.
for this year's budget. We don't know where we're going to be, well, we know at the end of the year where we're going to be as far as expenditures based on our best projections. There are some adjustments that happened through this year that we'll have to identify which was Reno-only savings, which then is allocatable back to both sides to see if there is a savings that goes back. We've also identified some issues with the formula going back to this current year where there is actually an underpayment by Truckee Meadows for an indirect cost. There's also the Station 13 and Station 9 with the browning out of Station 13 or Station 9 and Station 13. There's a lot of pieces in the mix for true up this year. Quite honestly, I think we're going to be close to a push that neither agency is going to owe either on that true up. But we are working on that, so we'll give you some more detail on that whole true up process. Unfortunately, it's very complicated.
But what we did earlier this year, the cuts to fire, was, how much was that in total?
The total for this year so far has been about 2.6 between salary reductions and services and supplies. Now, some of those are allocatable just to Reno. Some of the services and supplies are on both sides.
But if I could just take a percentage, there's $700,000 of that savings for this fiscal year that's still out there that we have to agree on.
We have to agree on.
And I know we're working toward that. And then and that would also carry forward to the next fiscal year.
Well, they're paying us based on what the current budget is. That's what their payment is based on. We're not looking at the prior year savings after we do a true-up for this year. So in this $45 million budget this year, we've made adjustments and cuts to that. That'll be part of the true-up. They paid us based on a $45 million budget. We've made reductions throughout the year. We'll allocate what was Reno only, what was Truckee Meadows and Reno together. There is also in that payment that they made us on the $45 million, they've actually should have paid a little bit more because there was a discrepancy with indirect cost. So we'll need to plug all that in, determine what was Reno, what was Truckee Meadows, and see where we end up at the end.
But in the big scheme of things, they don't give us their money up front. They have to pay us sort of, so they have the money in their pocket.
They pay us each
And
month.
they give it to us when they choose to give it to us.
By the contract,
I understand
they
that.
pay us each month.
But it's not like we've got to pay them back. We've got to come to an agreement here, and that's going to come hopefully next Monday. But,
Right.
I mean, if they choose to not do any of these things, we're going to be further in the hole here by over $1 million.
For next year?
Yes,
For-
the rest of this fiscal year and next year.
For the rest of this fiscal year, I think at the end, quite honestly, we're going to have a push. They're not going to owe us, we're not going to owe them. It's going to be very small. We need to do that. We need to project where we're going to end in this year, because we know we have some line items in this year's budget we're going to go over on. We know we have the holiday, the unfunded holiday, the unfunded comps, you saw my issue with fuel. We know we're actually going to go over. The language of contract says that after the first 1% of the savings, you split the payment, the amount of it by what they paid in. But as we went back and did the true and equitable model, fair and equitable model, we identified cuts that have happened that those savings should only be to Reno only. And Truckee Meadows shouldn't benefit for the savings that Reno's taken because we've not impacted their level of service. So for this year, we're working on that. For next year, you're exactly right. We're going to have to see whether or not we're going to go forward with the new actual cost methodology for what they're going to pay for us, pay to us, or if we continue with the same formula, there could be further reductions.
And just for the council, it's not that the county has all the cards here, there's really nothing in the contract to determine what those levels of service are. So what we could do is we could cut the level of service in the unincorporated area under the contract. So we have, just so it's not a one-sided deal, I want you to know that. And we'll be discussing that, I think, next Monday.
Next Monday,
quite a bit.
JFAB.
What is the figure on the unemployment compensation on 18 RIFs? Because I'm just surprised that staff wouldn't put that in the number, because it's, what is it, 30%? 20%?
33%.
So 33%, I mean, you've got to take that savings off the top. So that number is disingenuous in the sense that you're saying you're saving 1.3, but you're not. You've got to take what'd you say, 30?
33. Rob Miller, it's 33% of the salary, roughly, for the cost of
So
unemployment.
33%, and then in addition to that, so far we're scheduled to go $250,000 over on the overtime side, which will affect, if it's carried over, I mean, there's got to be a hole there somewhere. So I'm with you, Chief. I think I'm hopeful that we're going to come to an agreement, because I think we're getting at bare bones staffing levels now, and with the high fire season, that I think we're getting close. And I certainly hope, I agree with Councilman Ayazi, we'll have something on Monday to move forward with.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And just as a side note, we did receive a report from the Bureau of Land Management, and they are anticipating, the federal government is anticipating a higher than average wildfire season, which is a big concern for me. And lastly, I would be remiss if I didn't just speak out for the organization. No team, no member of a team wants to hear their own coach berate them, but I tell you, we've got good people doing good work. And regardless of all the things that have occurred, they come to work. When the bell rings, they get on the rigs. And as an example, that hotel, when they entered that hotel, that room was zero visibility. They found that individual and they drug him out. And those are the kind of things that makes a fire chief proud.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Guston.
Chief, can I ask you a sidebar question?
Yes, sir. I'm
Saturday night, you had two
ladder rigs at First
Yeah.
and Sierra Street?
Yes, sir.
Do you know what that,
I'm going to have to research that because I'm not aware why they were there, so.
maybe 10 o'clock at night?
At Sierra Street?
Yeah, Sierra, the old, the oldest building in town, the Mercantile Building.
Okay.
There was one ladder up, I didn't see any fire, any smoke, so I assume everything was okay.
There's one ladder up, had the lights on, and the other truck was getting ready to leave when
I'll look
So
into
nothing's
it. I
okay,
can
thank
send
you.
you an email on that, sir.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
Not a question, but I want to make a little comment here. I read the article in the newspaper yesterday, and I wanted to tell people, I called the President Jacobson today, that those comments that I made were a couple weeks ago when I was interviewed for that article, and I think we've come a long way since then, and I told President Jacobson that this morning on the phone. So I wanted the public to know that too, that I think we are getting very, very close, and I appreciate the union coming forward.
Yes. All right, Public Works.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. For the record, John Flansburgh, Director of Public Works. In the 6% target, it equates to just over $300,000 for Public Works. Again, just want to reiterate that what we're looking at here is a 6% reduction in the departmental budget. These are the general fund portion of the Public Works budget, which compares favorably or consistently across with the 7.5% reduction we're requesting of the bargaining groups. The impact of Public Works would be primarily, we only have a few areas that are general fund budgeted, downtown maintenance. You may recall a few years ago, that was about 80% funded from redevelopment. Last year that was put under the general fund at about half funding. And this would actually take us down pretty much to where no general fund subsidy would be in there at all, which means we would not have any maintenance of Riverwalk and the fountain would be turned off. The reason for that is that the Downtown Maintenance Special Assessment District does not include the Riverwalk area as part of that area that they're assessed on. Other impacts, reducing facility maintenance. We are currently about 50% staff. We'd have further reductions in our staffing and supplies, which would have an impact in reducing our service. Again, impact or emphasis on fire life safety and prioritizing other projects as we have time. We would be consolidating additional duties within contract administration, which means that more of our project management team would be performing those duties. And finally, in our traffic operations signal maintenance supply line item, we would have reductions which would make it more difficult for us to replace components immediately as a result of traffic accidents or knockdowns. What I mean by that is we have a couple different traffic signal cabinets models, and we keep inventory of those. However, as we reduce the amount of supply items we have, we may get ourselves into a situation where we would not necessarily have those components or cabinets to be replaced after an accident to have that signal back up and running immediately, and we may have some time lag in getting that together. We do use on traffic accidents the insurance recovery funds to replace those as readily as we can, but we may have a delay in that. That is my report.
Excuse me, give us a dollar amount breakdown on the maintenance and also the Riverwalk maintenance and the fountain. Give us a breakdown of dollars that you're talking about.
Okay.
Yes, Mr. President.
Yeah, I asked John last week, I didn't see it anywhere in the memo, what it would do to go from 6 days a week of street sweeping to rotation, just like the rest of the neighborhood streets, which is once a month.
And we will have that to you. We're getting the final numbers this morning. I have the numbers now. I just need to put that into memo form. I did misspeak. We are only doing 5 days a week on downtown. During the last reduction, we did reduce that from 6 days to 5 days. But we will have those reductions, what it looks like. Just in general, when we go and sweep the downtown, we are spending around 5 hours of those 5 days a week in the downtown area. Then we are going out to our other arterial collector type streets and doing the sweeping. We'll have a map that shows those areas that we are sweeping as part of that overall service and the amount that we're doing.
Mr. Mayor, to me, I think this is something that we have to discuss, policy issue, because we've got people who are going in and getting a reduction in their property tax bills, getting more service than those in the neighborhoods. And I think that we should be discussing that impact that they get their street swept 5 days a week when the rest of the city gets once a month, and they're getting a reduction in their property tax bills, and the rest of the city is subsidizing it. So I mean, I think this is an issue within the redevelopment agency we have to look at.
And if we cut it, yes, Mr. Hazy.
A rationale, I mean, I understand, but why is 6% of public works only $305,000? I know your budget is far more than that, than the 5 million.
Correct.
Could you go through that a little bit about why it's so small?
Yeah, when we're looking at the general funded portion of it here, and so the a general fund portion in Public Works, we have a portion of our administration that is covered in there. That's basically 2.65 people, I think we showed last week, remaining. We have about half of our traffic operations signal maintenance crew is funded in general fund, the other half in street fund. We have capital projects. Capital projects is kind of a slippery slope for us because although they come out of general fund, a lot of their funding is project related, and so as the street funds, sewer funds, other funding sources pay, they reimburse back to the general fund for their salaries and time spent on projects.
So vast majority of your overall budget is because the public has voted on certain things like the street project, or the sewer is an enterprise fund where the sewer fees pay for that.
That is
So it
correct.
doesn't, even if we had savings in those departments, it doesn't come back and affect the general fund.
It does not, and the only other budget we have would be the fleet fund, which is inter-service, which is a percentage of all the other budgets based on their fleet size.
And then on the signal maintenance and supplies, I remember at RTC, we were talking about that. I don't remember what the end result was, where RTC was going to help fund some of the older, getting some of those older units up to modern standards. Did that happen? Did that go through?
It did. We did have on the Q-Jump project that they had with their transit on the Virginia Street corridor, when they replaced those with the other type of model controller, we were able to take the model controllers we had in there, which were newer, and replace other controllers we had that were much older.
But we didn't come to an overall bigger discussion on all the older controllers that we had that they could pay for some of their funds?
We are having continued discussions with them in regards to the overall going to a virtual traffic management center type of a scenario, and by doing that, replacing some of our other equipment. So yes, we are doing that. In this particular line item, we're actually talking about, you have an intersection there, someone
runs into
goes off the road, runs off through the controller or cabinet, and we have to replace it.
Well, I'd like to be updated on where we are in the future with those talks, because I don't think it should go on too much longer. To replace some of our older things, because that certainly helps traffic management, even without this traffic management thing that NDOT wants to put in. And we had that discussion. I thought at RTC we were willing to transfer some of those funds over at our December retreat. I think you were there, Dwight. So I'd like to see where that is.
Okay. Any other questions? Thank you very much. IT, Communications.
Good morning. Rick Vandenberg, Communication and Technology Director. Unfortunately, with this budget, to hit the 6%, I had to impact our 911 dispatch operations. I've tried to stay away from that and try and reduce the impacts on that operation, but to hit the numbers that we needed to hit, the almost $500,000 or a little more than $500,000, we had to impact those. As such, the impacts result in about a 66% reduction in the overtime that we do. That actually works out to $270,000 that we take from our overtime budget. That impact will result in basically 911 calls possibly not getting answered, calls rolling over to other PSAPs in the area, assuming that they have personnel available to answer the calls there. And the likelihood is that we'll be shutting down secondary and second primary channels for some of the agencies, and our existing staff, or the staff on board, will be handling more units in the field. Right now we handle between 20 and 30 units as a single dispatcher, and that likelihood is, or it's likely that a single dispatcher will have to handle upwards of 30 to 40, maybe even 50 units in a field. That does turn into a life safety issue for our public safety officers out there. Additionally, along with the reduction in the dispatch overtime, there are 3 additional positions that we will be pulling out of the dispatch area, again, to hit the 6%. That results in $292,634, those positions coming out, so.
Are those dispatchers, Rick?
They would be supervisors. There's 2 supervisors and an admin level. It takes our supervision down to minimum. I mean, and the results of that is the requests, the complaint requests that we get, the requests for special reports that we get, the request to pull 911 recordings. All of that's going to be delayed because that's going to be put on the back burner because, to be quite honest, we're going to be focusing on priority calls for service and not the nice-to-haves. So,
Questions? Mr. Izey and Mr. Heshev.
On those 3 positions, they're supervisors, but do they have bump down rights?
Yes, one of them will have a bump down right into a dispatch position. The other one has indicated that they are planning on retiring, so we're going to freeze that position. And one position is an admin position. It's the only admin position that we have up there. I didn't want to bring that up because it's, yeah.
And then with the bump down, do they keep the same salary and benefits then?
I don't know. I don't think so. I think they get bumped down out of the category into the next level of the...
I thought they stayed there. If their pay is still in the same band, it stays the same.
That may be that may be the case. I think we'd have to talk to HR on that.
Renee Ringis, Director of Human Resources. If someone bumps down, they go into the salary range and or step in that lower range.
So they would go down to probably the highest level of that salary range?
Depending on where they are in their range, but it could be.
Because I just want to make sure, how does that really save us that much money? Because if they're not losing any money, and the lowest paid person, the last one in, is the one that has to leave.
They are, from the standpoint that the position that they would bump into right now is vacant. Actually, I have 2 vacancies, and I received a 3rd one this morning. Notification that.
So you're basically leaving vacant positions open?
Well, I've got 2 vacant positions that I will fill, 1 vacant dispatcher position that the supervisor would bump into.
But, okay, so if they don't lose any pay, it doesn't save any money, even if they go to a vacant position?
Excuse me, Renee Ringis again. They would lose pay because the ranges are at different levels, and I think they're 5 or 10% apart, so they would lose pay.
But it wouldn't be, I mean, according to this, it's almost $100,000. I mean, the difference would be maybe a couple thousand, I would assume, than this savings.
Dave, what we're doing is we're actually eliminating a position. So,
I understand it, but the person's still there getting paid.
But the position, the dispatch position is the one that's getting eliminated. So it's elimination of a position.
I think I understand it. But what you're saying is you have 2 open positions and you're going to keep 1 open position, is what's really happening here.
Okay, yes.
Okay.
I guess
Mr.
to
Asher.
follow up on what Dave's saying, the 2 positions you have open right now, are they funded for this fiscal year?
Yes.
So you're removing those from one of those from next fiscal year?
Yes.
So is there savings that we're seeing this fiscal year since those are open positions that we haven't accounted for?
No. Because we are recruiting for those positions.
But now you're not.
Now I won't be, no. Moving into the 6% scenario.
So there would be some additional savings this year for those open positions?
Yes.
Correct?
Yes.
That we didn't account for.
It's not a
couple
full
months.
position, but it's, you know.
Mr. Heshev.
Yeah, Rick, if we were going to try to find savings in other areas and limited your cut to not 6%, but something less, let's just say 3%, What would that do to this reduction in dispatch and potentially the life-saving issues that you were talking about? Is it linear, or is it?
I think it would probably be linear.
So, for example, with the 911 calls, they'd be rolling over to other PSAPs, would that be cut in half if you went from 6% or 3%, or could we eliminate that altogether?
The problem that I have on that is I can't project when the increase in the call loads are going to come in. We can have days up there where we've looked at it and we say, geez, you know, from a historical perspective, it doesn't make sense to bring somebody in on overtime to fill these positions, because historically it doesn't look like we get a lot of phone calls at that point in time or a lot of 911 requests for services. But that can also change in a matter of minutes, you know. So it's kind of hard to project out there. The assumption is that when a call comes in, if we aren't able to answer it within a certain time period, that it will roll over. And we've put in, as of this fiscal year, the E911 fund funded a new next generation 911 phone system that's going to all 3 PSAPs, the one in the city of Sparks and the one at Incline right now, that will allow the transfer of those phones between the PSAPs out there, which makes it a lot cleaner for us. If the call is transferred to the Incline facility, as an example, that's our best case scenario, because Incline shares or utilizes the same Tiburon application, Tiburon software and CAD environment that we do. If it goes to Sparks, for example, they don't. They can capture the information, but we have to re-enter the data.
I guess what I'm looking for, maybe you can get back to us on what, if you're going to take a reduction, under what scenario would you be able, because 2 things you said are, 1, we might not be able to quickly respond to a 911 call that comes into dispatch, and number 2, when you're then dispatching officers, for example, to the scene, that there's going to be a delay in doing that, which then would potentially put the officers at risk.
I don't think the dispatch is going to put an officers at risk, but when the officers in the field rely on the dispatchers as their backup. So it's one of those that if you've got a lot of channels or channel traffic going on, and you're putting a load on the dispatcher to kind of hear that these traffic issues are going on. And when I say traffic, I'm talking radio traffic, the communiques going on. And that's where the potential comes in, because when you've got a lot of units on a single bandwidth, it's like, think of it as a conference call. If you've got a lot of units all on the conference call speaking at the same time, the dispatcher may not be able to pick up a critical piece of information.
So I guess what I'm asking you to do is, if we did just a 2% cut as opposed to 6% and found the 4% someplace else, could we solve those problems you just described to us? Both picking up the 911 and then also the dispatcher being able to...
I think potentially we could, yeah.
Okay. So if I went to 3%, can we potentially I mean, I need to know where that break-even point is.
And I'll take a look at that and see what I can come back on.
Mr. Guston.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, that's pretty much an identical question for me. Just to reiterate, you said 270,000. I was wondering where that tipping point was. And I think that's what Councilman Haschef just asked, where you would come back and say what that number is to maintain the 911 call priority that you need. Is that what you're coming back with? The 270, is that
The 270,000 represents the cut that I'm taking to my overtime. It still provides us with 107,000 in overtime. Now, this is a reduction from, if I go back 4 years ago, we used to budget almost $500,000 out there for overtime, because we tried to staff up for all of the, we tried to fill all of the 911 positions, if you will.
I get it. What I'm trying to get at is, and I think that's what Councilman Hascheff was asking, is where's that tipping point where, what's that number that if we had to reinstate that, the 9/11 calls would have that priority?
And I'll go back and take a
Okay.
look at that and see what we can,
Thank you.
we can come back.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay. All right. Community development. Mr. Hester.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, council members. What we've essentially done is we asked the staff in community development who was retiring or who had plans to retire so that we could try to save some positions. And 2 individuals volunteered that they will be. They're both out of the Building Enterprise Fund, so that allowed us the opportunity, one's a planner and one's an inspector, to move a planner out of the general fund into the building fund and to move an inspector. We had to do a couple different shifts in there, but essentially move that person into the Building Enterprise Fund about 2/3. So what we are reducing in the general fund as a result of that is you'll be down to 1 planner in the city who handles cases and advanced planning. So if we have a caseload required for a planning commission or council meeting, we will not be doing any advanced planning projects. I've given you some example. We have a list of about 60 advanced planning projects that are on our to-do list, if you will. Some of the recent ones you just gave us, an example, are the conservation districts for wells, gaming locations, things we have to do for regional plan conformance. Those are the kind of projects that'll get delayed, put on the back burner. It'll also impact about 2/3 of a code enforcement officer's workload, so that will increase the response time, roughly 10% for the other code enforcement officers, and the caseload about 10%. A couple other things that we've done is we've proposed a 18% reduction in the regional planning budget. We also, it's not listed here, but there's a $17,000 plus dollar reduction in management and unrepresented salaries. It's not important for the general fund reduction, but there's also a slightly less than $9,000 reduction in the building enterprise fund for those salary cuts that those staff will take as well. The last, I guess there's a couple other points one other point I wanted to make is the city manager asked us to identify where we thought there were opportunities for managed competition. That, I guess that's a couple words to talk about comparing ourselves to the private sector and seeing what we could do. Could we privatize? I will tell you, I've talked with some of the staff in community development about it, and we've talked with a number of consultants. There will be a consultant at the Shared Services Elected Officials Committee talking about, I believe it's building permit and engineering privatization. As you know, we have privatized different parts of community development over the years, particularly when we had the really high levels of cases in the, I think, 2007, 2008. I believe every single function in community development could be privatized or could be put into the managed competition for consideration. In talking with city, I guess when we get down to that, you'll have a choice of, do you want to just take parts of community development or the whole department? There are ones that are easy, like building permits and business licenses, where consultants will do that for a percentage of the fee. There are ones that are a little harder because the fees don't cover them. Those are things like code enforcement and advanced planning. But I think you could also, if you wanted to, privatize the whole department out, either to a staff group that puts together a competitive bid or a private group. So you have some potentials there, and the city manager asked that we identify those. So with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Ms. Adram.
John, thank you. And I apologize, we didn't connect on Friday. But that specifically is the question relating to the joint meeting that we had with Sparks and the commission, county commission on Monday. On the agenda, we had the discussion about potential merger or change in at least operations of regional planning governing board. And the county took action and we did not. So I have that on our agenda for this week for further discussion. How could we improve the impacts if we did take some action? How would your budget be able to be improved? if we looked at a similar action that was discussed at that meeting on Monday?
Well, we assumed that you, well, for the rest of the council members, the county commission had an item where their staff informed them that they were looking at a 10% and an 18% cut. We assumed that you all would go with the 18% cut, and so that's in there, and that helps us actually exceed the number that was our 6% target. So in answer to your question, yes, if we took the 18, that would help our general fund. 10 would too, but not as much as the 18.
Is there more aggressive action that could be taken?
I spoke with the regional planning director Friday afternoon, and I think short of taking the organization apart, which I don't think we could do, through our budget process, that would be something the other two entities would have to work with us on and decide how we want to do it, and maybe even involve some legislation. I don't know that we could get much further than 18% right now, to be candid with you, but potentially you could, if depending on what you wanted to do.
You also have to check, because the legislature created that body.
Right.
We'd have to check and see what we could do.
That's what I meant by there might have to be some legislation.
If there was a merger of services, I know there's been discussion, and I don't know the details, I'll say that right up front, of RTC and regional planning. What kind of impact could that potentially have?
Well, I believe, if you look around the country, there are in a lot of states, I'll give you two examples. In Texas, the whole state's divided into councils of government. California has associations of government, where they take transportation planning, the MPO function, and they take this kind of planning that regional planning's doing, and maybe air quality and water quality, other things, and they put them together in a planning agency that's one or multiple counties. You could do that with RTC. Now, I know that, and they've had discussions at the Western Regional Water Commission, at the RTC board, and at the Regional Planning Governing Board, and there has not been consensus on doing that. Probably some of our council members who serve on those boards could be more articulate about that than I have, but it's been proposed a number of times, but there's not been an overall consensus to move that way. But that is a potential that's been done in other parts of the country.
Is that something that's being looked at down in Clark? Or
Well,
similar
Clark County's
discussions?
regional planning is, doesn't have the same legislation. They have what's called the Regional Planning Coalition, and they don't have conformance review, they don't have as rigorous requirements as, they don't have to have a separate staff like our statute requires us to do. So they basically float the function around between jurisdictions. But then again, our statute, which the mayor said we'd have to change, requires that we have a separate director who doesn't work for any of the other local governments, and that he or she have an assistant. So that's some legislation we would have to get if we were to do something like Southern Nevada does.
Thank you.
Sure.
Any other questions? Mr. Asher?
I was just going to add, I thought this 18%, what's the actual number tied to that, do you know?
It is, for us, it is $66,826.
Okay. Because if I remember right, the regional planning budget's about $1 million, and we contribute 40% of that, I thought. So if we were going to eliminate, to answer Sharon's question, we'd save about $400,000 in the general fund, I think.
Our actual number this coming year is, which is the same as this year, is $371,254.
All right.
And like you said, that's 40% of their total
Right.
budget.
Councilwoman Surprise.
Yeah, John, couple questions.
Sure.
How much does the building fund owe the general fund?
My understanding is at the end of the year, it should be even, except for the, I can't remember what OPEB stands for, but I'll look to the finance folks.
I don't know the number for the loan yet. Off the top of my head, I'll get that for you. As far as building fund, it'll be balanced this year. Won't have to have additional general fund money this year or next year, but I haven't done anything about the repayment of the loan. So, but I'll get that number for you.
Yeah, my understanding is right now the fund's running between $500,000 and $600,000 above projected revenue, which will go toward paying that off.
Yeah, I would like to see the schedule, because that fund in particular is set up by state statute to be an enterprise fund. I know we took planning out, but we have subsidized it quite a bit in building. And then, John, just elaborate a little, because first of all, I understand during the boom there was some privatization of consultants coming in, but I guess I have issue with going out privatizing that department, because land use is one of the most sensitive issues by our constituents, where they come in and people care what goes on in their backyard and how their neighborhoods are planned. How would you get an objective review by not having that done by city staff people?
There are firms that will go into a jurisdiction and they will review, let me back up, kind of divide the planning into current planning, which is defined as reviewing cases, and advanced planning, which is doing neighborhood plans, code amendments, and so forth. There are firms that will come in and do one or both of those under contract. So if they were looking at just cases, they would look at your existing code and your existing plan policies and say, based on that, this is what our recommendation is. It would still go to your city planning commission and to the city council if that was the process outlined in your code. They just serve as the staff instead of city staff. If it was
How many other jurisdictions do this? Anybody in Nevada doing it?
I don't know of anybody in Nevada doing the whole thing right now. I know that they have. We had some cases processed by 3 different firms that way about 4 years ago.
Yeah, during the height. I just think there may be a perception out there that you can have a tainted process if it's not done by, I mean, there's always, and we hear those cases here at the council. So staff, a lot of times staff comes in with a recommendation that's not favorable to a certain developer, and then we hear those cases here at this level. So I'm just concerned about the
that would certainly be a policy
there.
call on the behalf of the council, whether you wanted to do that or not. I'm just letting you know that option exists.
And then one last question. Has staff reviewed, and we talked about this at the joint meeting, getting back to Councilwoman Zager's question, almost $400,000, seeing if we can get that tacked on to a bill where at least we could maybe go to the Clark County model, where you're not having a full separate staff in the regional planning agency. I mean, that's a ton of money that we're having to put out there. Is there a bill, John, or maybe a better question for staff, for cadence on that?
We have not tried to identify another bill to attach something like that to. We as staff wouldn't initiate a change like that unless the 2 councils and the county commission, who are the parties to that, agreed to do that, because in state law it says we cannot unilaterally initiate legislation that affects regional planning unless we all agree to it.
So that would have to be agreed to by all 3 bodies. Well, we've seen how far that's gotten. We hear it every year, Mr. Mayor. Oh, we'll wait till next legislative session.
And we actually will talk about that a little bit on an agenda item later today, as well as the item Wednesday that Councilwoman Sadra put on. So,
okay. Is our 12 o'clock meeting time? Okay. We're going into recess in a legal meeting. We'll be tied up for about an hour.
Thank you. For the record, Jill Olson, Finance. The Finance Department target for 6% is the $60,000 number. Included in the achieved number of $52,000, we do have, it's not included on the slide, but I did want to mention there's $16,000 that is part of that number, that is the 7.5% reduction of the unrepresented employees. There are 2 unrepresented employees in the Finance Department remaining, so $16,000 of that number is related to the 7.5% reduction committed by those 2 employees. In addition, there is a reduction of 1 full-time employee to a part-time employee. The impact of that will be probably in the area of invoice data entry and segregation of duties shifted even further. There are only approximately 12 employees remaining in finance, so that impact, though we do have separate sewer employees, we are all sharing all of the duties. So the impact will probably most heavily impact the accounts payable data entry, but it may have somewhat of an impact on the sewer billing, though we're trying to focus our priority on the sewer billing so that we limit the impact on the sewer billing so that it does not delay the sewer billing process. This shift will also put some additional pressure on our ability to maintain proper internal controls, but we will certainly maintain that as a priority. This could cause delays in vendor payments, though we will try to avoid those delays. We want to avoid any late payment penalties. In some preliminary estimates of what we pay out weekly in vendor payments, we're estimating that those late payment penalties should come in below $10,000 over the fiscal year. We'll try to keep that at zero, but we did want to make you aware that there could be some late payment penalties should there be delays in vendor payments. In addition, due to that shift in the work, it will reduce our ability to monitor the Public Works contract payments. We monitor their larger construction contracts as far as looking at the total contracts, managing or at least monitoring the amounts for retention and making sure that we track the change orders and we reconcile those with the Public Works employees and make sure that we don't go over the total contract amounts and then pay out the retention at the end of the contract. In addition, we monitor the employee credit card usage to make sure that all of the amounts, all of the payments are eligible credit card expenditures and that we have all of the appropriate receipts to back up the credit card payments. And with that, I will answer any questions.
Okay, thank you. Any questions? I guess I have a question for you on, in terms of vendor billing and late payments, would those be the related duties to the $16,000 savings you talked about? Or is it just going from one full-time to a half-time? Is that where that would
It's not related to the, it's not related to the $16,000. The $16,000 is related to the 7.5% reduction in the unrepresented employees' salaries. The vendor payments is related to the reduction of one of the full-time equivalents to a part-time employee, which will cause us to shift the duties of the remaining employees and the duties of the half-time employee.
Okay, so that shift from a full to a half has that much roll downhill effect on you then?
It will, because we have so few employees remaining that we have a large volume of invoices that get entered every week that we're going to have to shift a lot of that data entry. And we can't have certain employees doing data entry because of the segregation of duties issue. They can't be entering and then editing those same invoices.
Do you have an idea of how many credit cards city employees, or how many city employees have credit cards?
We can get you that information. We do have a spreadsheet that has, in fact, we're in the process of reviewing all of those and checking the credit card limits, and the department heads have been reviewing those, and we are going through a process now of possibly reducing those and taking a look at that.
But I guess if you reduce those, then that wouldn't necessarily save you more time in terms of going through it, because they would have receipts that they would, if they didn't put on the credit card, they'd have receipts that, yeah, so.
Right, that wouldn't save time, and that one kind of has us in a catch-22, because the more purchases we make on the purchasing cards, the higher our rebate at the end of each fiscal year. So we're trying to balance that as well. We want to increase that rebate amount as well as manage the credit card purchases.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Councilman Azzi?
Not a question, just a statement. I don't see how we could do this anymore in finance.
Yeah.
We have to pay our bills. We have to make sure that everything is, I mean, that's what's important to us, to make sure that we're keeping track of what's happening. I don't see how we could cut this amount.
Is there associated number with that full-time to half-time?
It's about $38,000, I believe.
Thank you very much. Human Resources.
Good afternoon, City Council, City Manager, Vice Mayor. Renee Runges, Director of Human Resources, and the Human Resources 7.5% salary benefit reduction from unrepresented employees actually is for 5 employees. We have been restructuring and implementing organizational efficiencies for the last several years. In fact, the staffing level in HR for 09-10 was 13.5 positions, and for 10-11 it's 6.5, and this reduction will further reduce that by another FTE. We have added duties of 4 manager positions to the Human Resources Director position. We have taken 2 professional positions, combined them into 1, and added also the supervision of payroll. Of course, our strategic priorities have not changed. It's to support the operating departments as well as the employees, and to focus the most amount of resources on benefits administration, payroll, and labor relations, and handling the other duties and activities in HR as needed. For example, workers' comp, diversity programs, classification, recruitment, and so forth. And as has been presented by Parks and Recreation earlier, the duties of staffing the RAC, the Reno Access Advisory Commission, has been shifted to the Parks and Recreation Department, and the individual that is providing the staff support there was also involved with the RAC all along. The other thing is that we are pursuing shared services in the areas of citywide training as well as recruitment, if that is going to be possible in the future. And with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? Thank you. Renee. Muni Court, we saw Judge Howard. He wasn't sure whether he was going to make it back or not, but because he had docket this afternoon.
Yes, thank you. I believe he's in court right now.
Okay. Thanks, Matt.
Thank you. Matthew Fisk with the Municipal Court. Good afternoon, City Council. Our presentation is very straightforward. To meet the 6% target, it will mean reductions in force and a pretty drastic reorganization of the remaining employees. What that translates to is less services to the community, reduced customer service, increase in wait times, case processing times, things like that. And then, of course, just like throughout the rest of the city, a heavier workload on the salaried employees. So,
questions of Matt? Councilman Ayazi?
Yeah, I went back just, sorry Judge Howard isn't here, but I was going to send an email out, but I only got to watch that this morning, was the presentation that he gave to us regarding the courts. And what I'm going to be asking for is some definition of how many cases, the caseload that they have here compared to Las Vegas, and a better synopsis of the difference between the Justice Court and Municipal Court. I mean, he gave us 3 examples of why it's different, but he didn't tell us why it was different. He said it was because of they have public defenders. We have to do that internally. You know, a couple of those, if we can put some dollar figures to those. Because as I understand it, all we can do is reduce your budget. We can't tell you or the judges how to reduce that. So whether it's a reduction in force or however it goes, it's nothing that we get to decide. Right. But I'm still curious as to the caseload that they have and how much the pro tem judges do for each one, just to see whether we should look at, as he stated, the caseload has been dropping. So should we be looking at eliminating one of the judge positions?
Okay, and were you able to review the information we provided last Friday? Okay, so we can provide more detail there. I will say, really the caseload has been flat going back 5 years. If you go back 10 years, the traffic caseload has increased by 53% and criminal by 22%. Our caseload was flat in criminal and traffic over the last 5 years up until this year. It's dropped by 15% as far as traffic goes, but the criminal caseload has actually gone up by 7.7%.
I'd like to see some comparisons to other municipal courts. I mean, I've been told, and again, this is,
Yes.
I haven't done any research, that in Las Vegas, the municipal court handles 3 times the caseload that we're handling up here per judge.
In the packet, I do have some comparisons to 4 other municipal courts and the local justice court.
Okay, that'd be
So,
great.
per judge.
Thank
So,
you very much.
Okay.
Councilman, oh, here
Yeah,
comes
and
Councilman
my,
Dortch.
yeah, and my question kind of follows right along where Dave was going, because I'm looking at the annual report of the judiciary. And, I mean, I look at North Las Vegas has 2 municipal judges, Las Vegas has 6, Henderson has 3, we have 4. North Las Vegas handles about 4,500 cases per, and these are non-traffic cases, and that might be where some discrepancy is.
Yes, there are some differences there.
But these are non-traffic cases. North Las Vegas handles about 4,500 cases per judge. Las Vegas handles about 4,300 cases per judge. Henderson handles 2,300 cases per judge, and we're at about 2,000 cases per judge.
Our most comparable court, Mr. Dortch, is the Henderson Court as far as caseload. And one of the things to consider is the way the communities look and feel. Henderson most closely resembles Reno, much more so than North Las Vegas or Las Vegas. You know, for example, running a red light on the Las Vegas Strip is different than running a red light on the Monte Ranch Parkway. So there's some things like that to consider. But I would just say that Henderson is the community that feels most like Reno. So,
I mean, we've got the second most municipal judges in the state out of all the cities in the state. I mean, yeah, Las Vegas
Yes.
and then us. Population-wise, we're 3rd or 4th? 4th?
yeah, I'd be happy to. We actually have a little more thorough analysis of this, so we can provide that to you.
Okay.
Sir.
Judge Howard's here too. Hi, Judge.
Good afternoon. Judge Howard, Reno Municipal Court. You know, one of the things that I think that we have to look at, and it's just a decision that you as a body have to decide, those courts, because of the population base, completely different from our court. They do mass canvassing of the indigent or defendants that appear before them. For example, if they have a docket of, let's say, 110 people that show up on any given day, just as an example, there's no way that they're going to be able to give the attention to those cases that we do. They might have 5 people come up before them on a charge of driving under the influence of alcohol, for example, and I've seen this. They have them all come up, canvass them all at one time. I'm not saying it's legally, it's acceptable, because there's a Nevada Supreme Court decision that came out earlier this year that allowed for mass canvasses. But I'm not really sure that if I'm a member of the community and I'm charged with a driving under the influence violation or another offense, that I don't want to get up and get the undivided attention of my case before a judge with a prosecutor, as opposed to the mass cattle call that they have down in Las Vegas. Now, I want you to understand, I'm not criticizing Las Vegas. I've talked to those judges. It's a matter of we don't have any alternative. This is what we have to do to move the docket along. We don't have that situation occurring here in Reno. Yes, we have about 50% less on our docket than they have down in Las Vegas. Those facts and numbers they are what they are.
Yeah, and I mean, from my standpoint, I mean, we've got to look at this and say, hey, is the way we're doing business the optimal way to do business? Probably. But in these trying times, are there other ways that we might have to look at doing business? I mean, those are the only things that I'm putting on the table. So.
Understood.
Any other questions? Appreciate you coming back, Judge.
Sure.
Thank you.
Compare between your civil and criminal, and I started to explain it really.
Hold on. Other questions?
I'm just was asking, and I remember that report. Maybe I should get that from Dwight about the comparison between your court and some other courts, but also and I didn't put this in email, and that's what I explained, I didn't do that, so I wasn't putting you on the spot today. I was going to send it out in an email about the pro tem judges and all that. I mean, you hit on exactly what I was saying last week. If I go in front of a judge, I want an elected judge.
Right.
Instead of somebody.
Right.
But I think we do have to at least look at that, whether we go forward or not. That has to be an option. And I don't know what legally we would even have to do if we wanted to eliminate a court. It would probably, I would assume, have to be after the term of one of the judges, or we could say, you could still be there and fill in all the pro tem, but we just take away the court. I mean, there's other options that we can look at. But we have to make sure that if we do that, we do it in time. Because the budget's almost $7 million, $6.8 million for municipal court right now.
I don't believe that's the case.
It's at about 5.5. The court has been making significant contributions
We've
to.
made continual reductions each year in our budget.
I'm just looking at the first page, says the budget summary says $6.8 million at the general fund. So you might be subtracting what you give back.
910.
Oh, okay.
This year it's
you're right.
6.5.
6.5.
And then there's about another 1.6 million that the court is plugging into that to bridge that gap. So the city's part is about 5.5 million.
You gave us 700 at one time here not too long ago, didn't you?
That's correct. Above and beyond what was requested.
Any other questions? Thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, you? Okay, City Attorney's Office.
Good afternoon, Tracy Chase on behalf of the Reno City Attorney's Office. You can see our 6% target amount was approximately $175,000. Prior to getting this request, we wanted to advise council, the city attorney has already looked at its budget, scrubbed it thoroughly, and we have reviewed opportunities for additional revenue for the city of Reno. One of those opportunities was taking on the risk fund as management of that as of March of this year. That equates to about $200,000 a year in ongoing salary savings for the city of Reno because of the reductions that were done to accommodate that move. In addition, in conjunction with the Reno Municipal Court, we took on additional prosecution of cases for UNR, Airport Authority, Tribal Authority, Railroad, Washoe County School District. In coordinating the numbers with Mr. Fisk, he indicates that's about $200,000 in revenue a year that's coming through the system. None of those revenue enhancement benefits the city attorney's office budget directly. They should enhance either the municipal court or the general fund. In looking at meeting the 6% target, that is a 7.5% salary reduction across the board, and that includes the city attorney himself. In addition, because of that 7.5%, you are taking some of the lawyers' salaries who may be making, I don't know, approximately $100,000 down to, a little bit over $90,000. We will experience transition in the office because there are jobs out there in the market that pay higher than that for lawyers. We believe that experience is the key to maintaining the service quality we provide the council, and we anticipate transition will lead to service delivery issues for the council. We will have reduction in supplies and operating expenses and witness fees, which are part of our just general operational budgets. We already are having significant delays, especially when we have staff that's on leave. Like, for example, for the courts, we have 27 dockets that we cover weekly, and we have just enough staff to cover those dockets. So when one individual is out, we usually have to request an accommodation from the court. In addition, we anticipate that our service prioritization will occur throughout the year, and we'll be taking it down. We won't be taking it down. We are at minimum service levels as it is. So if we get a request for an opinion, we basically have to gauge whether or not that request is coming from the council itself, you have top priority, or from maybe another department, and they would have to wait for their legal opinions. Any questions? I'd be happy to answer them.
Councilman Ayazi?
Percent salary reduction going to happen no matter what? I mean, that's what we were asking all the employees to do. And I thought this was, so is that happening?
Yes.
Okay. And we have one attorney that's under contract. What's happening with that?
We have one attorney, it's not under contract, it's under critical shortage designation. They are an employee like any other employee in the city of Reno. We were anticipating bringing that back for a 2-year period, because last time we brought that back to city council at the same time, you gave us a position at that time, which we filled, and that person in that position is learning the community development and land use department. They have been about 2 years in the position. Normally, to train an attorney in an area that's a boutique or specialized area, it takes from 3 to 5 years, so we would like another 2-year period on that. And in addition, that will give us the experience to maintain the level of service turnaround that council would like on its matters.
And how long have we had that position it's been 5 years?
I believe that you approved 2 critical shortages in the past, so this would be the 3rd one, council member, coming through the system.
But didn't that expire in April?
No, that expires at the end of the fiscal year,
Oh,
your determination of 2 years ago.
Thank you.
Councilman Hesjeff?
Yeah, I had a similar question that Dave asked. The way I read this, the 7.5% salary reduction would be in addition.
No, it's the 7.5% that you're requesting across the board. Because we weren't allowed to provide a presentation last week, we wanted to draw it to your attention that we do anticipate transition at that 7.5%. And so we do believe that our experience in handling matters will lessen.
Okay. So in order to hit the 6% target, you'd have to also include the 7.5% reduction.
No, the 6% target can be met with the 7% salary reduction that you're requesting across the board of all departments, plus the other reductions in supplies and operating expenses and witness fees that we have in our budget.
All right.
Councilman Zadra?
In the transition, first of all, how many employees are you currently in the department, and what do you anticipate that transition number might be?
Currently, we have 24.5 employees in the department. That's down from
Both divisions?
Both divisions, yes, ma'am. That's down from the 1998 levels of 28.5, if you kind of get a feel for the difference in what we have left in the office after the series of reductions we faced. As to the transition, it's difficult to say because I don't want to single out any employees, but we do have information that some of our legal staff level is seeking employment, and possibly some of our attorneys are seeking outreach and to see what availability is out in the market.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
One more quick question.
I'm
Tracy,
sorry.
on your department restructuring chart, it's here.
Is that from last week, council member?
I don't know. I think it's this week's.
Oh, yes.
It might be last week's. But it has the current over here. 16, 18, 19. When I add this column up, it says it's 26.
We have 20, oh, then something's wrong with the numbers. We have 24.5 left in the department.
I just gave you 1.5 point more people.
We take that with the funding.
I want to take that off my, you could just have that.
Thank you. I'm sorry if there's an error in our numbers.
Are we having a presentation of civil service? I'm sorry. Excuse me. Madam Clerk, I'm sorry.
That's
Excuse me.
quite all
Let me
right.
get,
Okay, Lynette Jones, City Clerk, and for the 6% target, it would be a reduction in mine and the unrepresented employees, 7.5% reduction, salary and benefits. And also, in order to meet that target, I would have to reduce one full-time employee to a part-time.
Could you repeat that? Yeah.
No.
Any questions at all? Thank you very much. Sorry to jump ahead. Now, civil service, yes.
Rick Bailey, Chief Examiner, Reno Civil Service Commission. And you can see we're taking a 7.5% cut in salaries and benefits. Employees are non-represented, And our one employee has absorbed the other employee that we laid off last time. And we've had a reduction in our overall outside other benefit area, budget area of about 70%. We have found ways to reduce our assessment center costs down to maybe 50 to 70% of a reduction in those assessment center costs. So if you have any questions, I'd be glad to answer those.
Any questions at all? Thank you very much. City Manager's Office.
Good afternoon. Chris Good from the City Manager's Office. City Manager's Office has the ability, because none of our staff are represented, so the first place we went was to the 7.5% salary reduction across the board. That gets us most of the way there. Beyond that, we thought we'd go to eliminating the internal audit, eliminating the citizen survey that we used to do every 2 years, I believe. And one item here that we already have implemented, we've eliminated the minutes support at the neighborhood advisory boards. So as you know, your council liaisons have taken on providing the minutes themselves there. We've also reduced travel and training in the budget down to about just about zero for travel and training. And with that, I'll take any questions.
Any questions? Ooh, short and sweet. Thank you.
Quickly, the last item in this part of the presentation is for the City Council's budget. In looking at what to reduce, I thought I would lay before you this menu of non-city programs. And as was explained in the memo that you received on Saturday, this line item actually has increased in this proposed budget, but there's no new spending here. What we've done is reorganize the way we keep track of these non-city programs. We put them all directly in the council's budget so that you will have direct control over them. So from staff's perspective, this is the place to look for savings, and I would leave it to council's discretion for where you would like to find those savings.
Okay. I guess maybe Councilman Safraz is not here, but I thought she mentioned something about EDON, that we hadn't spent that money this year, but they still requested it. Was that true?
EDON, we have spent that money this year. It used to be a $75,000 annual bill. They reduced it by 5% 2 years ago. So that bill would now be $71,250.
Okay. All right.
I think some of the discussion has been with the talk at the legislature of changing economic development. And I think Jessica had mentioned maybe pulling that out because we weren't sure. I don't know that we want to pull it out of the budget. I think we want to wait, and my opinion is I think we want to wait and see what happens. I mean, because we might, whatever's going to be there's going to be an entity there handling economic development, and we still might be participating with them. So.
Okay. I just remembered some discussion about that. Any other questions or comments? Councilman Hazard.
A couple on that one. I think what her issue was, I won't speak for her, but I know that it's what is EDON doing for us now? Should we pull out, for instance, I don't think the county funds them anymore, and I don't think the city of Sparks funds them anymore, and yet they still sit on their board, as I understand it. I haven't done any research, but that's one of the issues is if there's no harm to you, then why should we keep paying into it if they're not really helping us? Are they now concentrating on bringing business to Reno, or is it just still Western Nevada? I think some of these other ones, too, haven't come forward yet. I know Sierra Arts, we were funding a particular program that may have come to an end last time. The one thing that I have a question about, though, is there's other things that we have actually cut from our budget that has historically been in the city manager's budget, like we used to have travel. I mean, if we're going to move this over, we used to have $5,000 each in our travel budget and some other things that were in the city manager's. So when the city manager takes that cut, it's actually a cut from us. So if you're going to move stuff over, then let's move it all over and put the cuts in the right place. I mean, when we were asked to be at special events and had tables and stuff like that, we've cut all that out. In the past, it's all come from city manager's budget. So I think if you're going to move this over and say, okay, here's what the city council's been doing and choose this year to move it over, then we should look at all those things to move over. Because it does look sort of bare on our end when it's only our salaries, and that's all that's in our whole budget, which isn't true. And I don't know where we are with Sierra Spirit, whether we were continuing to fund that. I haven't got a request from RTC again for next year to do that. So I think there's some stuff in here that we certainly get to talk about. And I don't mind doing that when it comes up. But if this is what we're going to put in and that's going to be our budget is 421, we can live with that and figure out where the cuts will come at a future time, but we can sure live with that.
Okay. Any other comments? All right. Thanks,
Thank you.
Chris.
Well, the last slide of the presentation was a summary of additional cuts that the city could make if we were to see additional impacts from state legislation and or federal legislation. And the point that I wanted to make with that slide was that we have prepared alternative plans of up to 10%, so that would be an additional 4% cut over the 6%, and it would mean another 50 positions would have to be eliminated. We're compiling all the information so that if we have to take the 6% cut and then we find that there's further cuts that need to be made, we'll be able to come back to you with those service impacts. And that was just a summary of the departmental amounts. But the key point there is that we do have plans in place in case there's further impacts to the city budget that we have not seen so far. With that, that was the end of that presentation, and we were prepared to move into B3.
B3,
on
okay.
capital improvement.
Before we do that, Kevin, let
Yes,
me
sir.
ask you then, because the purpose of this presentation was if we do not get concessions from the bargaining units, what I heard today is, unless I missed one, all the non-represented groups are coming forward with 7.5% cut in pay. In one way or another, maybe it's paying part of the PERS or something. We didn't go into that detail. But what is the last day that we need to know from the rest of the employees before we have to send out termination notices?
I will be asking for a resolution for a reduction in force on May 17th. We have to send out the notices the second week of June. I would prefer to know before June 1st because that's when we actually have to submit our budget to the state.
And so our budget has got to be, to the state, has to be balanced.
Yes.
So, and I also don't want it to be taken differently. If we have to send out those RIF notices, it doesn't mean we can't do like we've done in the past. If we come to some agreement, we get to rescind those. But we're required to do that just to have a balanced budget to send to the state.
Yes, sir.
And you said it's on the 17th. Do we have a meeting on the 17th? That's a Tuesday. Or
We
did you
have we have a budget hearing.
on the
I believe
17th.
it's in
That's
the
right.
afternoon.
We're required to on the 17th, right?
Yes.
So that's a
Thank you.
8 or 9 days.
Yes, sir.
For the record, John Flansburgh, Director of Public Works. Going through the capital improvement program, our plan, our committee met, we reviewed all the current projects that we have. We also viewed those that maybe were no longer projects that we were identifying due to where we were, but also those that were becoming more and more critical. We organized them into 4 main sections. Annual maintenance programs, these are those projects that annually receive money. For instance, facility maintenance would receive some funds, and we'll go into those and others. We have one-time capital projects. That would be like our northwest pool roof. And then, of course, those projects that are specially funded, such as sewer and storm drain capital maintenance, and then the park regional construction tax, those that are designated to certain areas. In the general fund, on the annual maintenance programs, we'll get into what some of those look like. On the one-time capital projects that we're recommending, we have the Northwest Pool roof replacement, National Bowling Stadium roof repairs. There are some fire alarms in some of our actual fire stations, upgrading or placing them in some that don't even have fire alarms, installation of oil sand separators to meet our water quality standards. And then the corporation yard, that's actually a project for future expansion, co-location of maintenance activities to the corporation yard. Fire fleet is a potential or something that we've looked at there. That's just a placeholder now for looking at future improvements. And then we have some concrete repairs on the ice rink. Street fund and sewer capital projects, those, we just fund the amount that's available for those programs. We actually bring those back to you on an individual basis for approval when we are ready to award. And then, of course, Park District projects, we have a couple that are listed in our overall program going forward. The roofs, just a couple pictures here, showing some damage on the RPD headquarters roof. Some over at the National Bowling Stadium, and then, of course, the Northwest Pool roof damage. On the Northwest Pool roof, we have received a quote that is around $800,000. We are asking for funding at about a $710,000 level. We actually believe we're looking at different types of roofing, what we might be able to replace that roof with, because we think that's an extraordinarily high amount for that roof for what we have. So we are looking at what our options are going forward for that purpose. Annual programs, here's what the list looks like. Again, our annual sidewalk contract, those are for slips and falls, other issues that come up, or working with the RTC on some of those special assessment districts where they're more of what we would fund. Our traffic calming, continuation of that program, replacement of school flashers as the equipment ages and needs replaced. We have a category in here for parking lot driveway repairs. We have over $3 million in parking lots that are in a failed condition at this point. This would help us start to catch up on some of those repairs. Replacement of our hardware as needed, our neighborhood lighting, sidewalks, guardrail, again, facility maintenance, the ones that are all listed here in front of you. Answer any questions on these annual programs that you may have.
Are these all ones that we're required to do, or we just, like if we just needed $2 million, could we cut them all out, or some required? I know that our ADA, we're trying to do that to keep up with some of those things that we have to do. Is there something that could we do that, or are they required?
Some of these are what I would say are required. I would say the facility maintenance, those are the general projects and facilities that there's no other funding for those types of things as they come up. We've been funding that for quite some time at about a $400,000 level.
And what's a signal improvement program?
Signal improvement program is actually replacement. Similar question to what you asked in regards to the replacement of the controllers. So it's updating of those equipment. We still have some out there. We will get a report back to you per your earlier question.
RTC did. And then the various Parks and Rec projects, why wouldn't that be under the Parks and Rec, or just a CIP?
Those are actually, do we have someone from Parks and Rec here, Jeff?
Jeff Mann, Parks Manager. Those projects are what we used to refer to as Parks 350K projects.
Okay.
Beginning with this year's budget, what OMB has done is move all of CIP programs into one area so that they can be tracked.
And the last one on this was the downtown lamp replacement. Are those for the candy cane lamps?
Primarily, yes.
I thought we had an agreement with our company to replace those with those LEDs or something they were going to put in there.
That's correct. That has been happening. This would also be part of the budget for replacement of if we have a knockdown or that type of replacement of the actual pole itself. Other questions?
Other questions? John, when you talk about the Northwest Pool roof, is there a consideration for solar in that roof? Or does that drive the price up even more than you're talking about now?
We are looking at all options at this point. Right now, what we have is basically the ability for the sunlight to come through, helps with the heating, internal heating of that, and then when we have warmer days, summertime, we're able to move that roof up on tracks to let it vent. And so we are looking at options of, do we go to a different type of roof that doesn't have the mechanical moving for venting and go to some sort of mechanical venting process? Do we look at different types of materials for the roof itself from what we currently have? Those are the types of questions we're looking at as we're scoping that project right now. We feel reasonable, comfortable with the replacement from the company whose product we currently have, that we're in the ballpark with our estimate.
Okay. Any other questions? Thank you. Redevelopment Agency. No?
Mr. Vice Mayor, the reason that this is on the agenda still is we wanted to leave the opportunity for council to ask any additional questions, but we made the presentation yesterday. Moving forward, under either scenario, we're going to have to look at what our options are there with our debt. However, I will add to that we will provide a list of all the changes in property values for downtown properties over the past couple of years, based on the comment that we heard from Ms. Savraza earlier in the meeting. If you have any other questions, I'll be glad to take them down and get back to you.
Okay, thank you. B5, update discussion and potential direction to staff on shared services, regionalization and consolidation opportunities.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Mayor, members of the council, Mr. City Manager. We have a number of initiatives going on in this area, so staff would like to take the opportunity to catch all of the council members up on where we are on these, because I know all of you don't sit on every committee, and get some direction, because we are in negotiations on all of these. The 4 topics we want to cover are regionalization of fire, the Community Assistance Center, dispatch, and regional planning. We had a little bit of a discussion on regional planning during the CD budget item. So the order will go in as fire, CAC, and dispatch, and then I'll come back up and talk on regional planning. So we'll start with Chief Hernandez.
Good afternoon, members of the council. Mike Hernandez, Reno Fire Chief. As you are well aware, there has been significant discussion at the county level regarding regionalization of fire service. At the April 26th, 2011 meeting, the Truckee Meadows Fire Protection Board gave direction to county staff to explore options and look at various models that are currently out there with respect to regionalization. As council is aware, the Reno Fire Department does contract out with the Truckee Meadows Fire Protection District for fire services. We manage, operate, train, maintain records, in essence run the Truckee Meadows Fire Protection Service for the county. Again, at its 26th meeting, direction was given to county staff to explore possible options, look at different governance models, and just to come up with kind of a brainstorming session, if you will. We're at a point now where, as your fire chief, I need direction from this body with respect to 3 very basic items. Simply, does the council have an appetite or a desire to explore possible regionalization of fire service? Second, is there a governmental or a governance model that council would like explored? And lastly, if the council so desires to explore, or at least sit at the table, have me sit at the table and listen to options, I need that direction from this body with respect to regionalization of fire service. This is primarily an opportunity to sit at the table with the 3 primary agencies, Truckee Meadows and the Sierra Fire Protection District boards and their chief officer staff, to discuss what options are out there and what consolidation models could be brought back for consideration for this body to either adopt, advise, modify, discuss, provide direction on. With that, I'll take any questions.
Okay, and again, the 3 questions are to explore the regionalization, continue to do that. What model, if there was?
Does this council have a preference regarding model? Is there a preference for a JPA, continuation of interlocal agreements? I'll probably defer to legal counsel, because there's a variety of different options, that contract for service, There are different methods to bring a regionalized fire service into fruition. Again, I'm just seeking direction from this body in terms of, is there a preference for a specific type of model, or I can come back with various types of governance structures, for guidance and recommendation, from the council.
And then finally, if we want you to sit at that table.
Correct.
Okay.
I would need direction
Those are
from this body. That's
Those are
correct.
the three requested topics.
Yes. And then you will find a motion to that effect at the back end of this item, this agenda item.
Okay, first of all, questions or comments to Chief? Dave?
Comments, if you mean regionalization, is, I know we legally can't do it, but you mean a district?
Correct.
Is that what we're talking about?
Correct.
Because I was talking to Tracy, we really can't have a district over the covers an incorporated town. So it'd have to be somewhat similar to what we're looking at here already as a contract or something like that.
Either a contract for service or some type of interlocal agreement where all three agencies agree to either contribute, manage, et cetera. And again, this is very much in the exploratory phase.
And I personally am not opposed to that at all, but I really think that what needs to happen is we should come out up front with some dollar figures to see if we could fit that in. Like what our current budget is for fire, what that is as far as property taxes. I don't know what one penny in Reno brings in anymore. It used to be about $600,000. I don't know what that is now. And compare that to what their budget is now. I don't think we have that amount in our property tax because we have about 96 cents in property taxes available. But I believe there's close to 60 cents of that is already spoken for by the public, has voted where it goes. So I don't know how much of that we have available for us to move around to say we would dedicate this funding source to that project. It's certainly something that we can look at because it sort of covers both sides. This is the maximum, but the union's got to be involved in that from the start. And I think I would ask them, are they interested in looking at a district? Because I don't want to spin anybody's wheels since we don't have any personnel to work on anything right now. If they're not interested, and we can't even look at it in the first month about whether we could afford it, I don't think it should take us that long to take that next step to see whether we should look at that or not. But those two things would have to be answered to me, is how much the highest amount it would cost us that we would have to dedicate toward that source, and would the union agree to that?
Certainly, and these are the type of discussions that we would have with the Truckee Meadows Fire Protection District and Sierra. And there's no doubt we would have to enter into some type of discussion with the labor groups to seek a more equitable method of managing fire services within the region.
Well, it seems like if the determining the budget and the participation by the members of the union are paramount, then 2 and 3 couldn't be answered until we know whether we can even move forward. Because what model, I don't know. That depends on what they would do. And then you sit at the table. It all contingent on Councilman Iazi's 2 points about, is there a budget available and is the union willing to move forward? Otherwise, I think the other two are moot. That's my opinion.
Yeah, I have similar response. I think, I don't see a problem with the chief sitting at the table, probably sooner than later. And then I think we should explore what it would take to actually join up. And then as far as the model, I'll leave it up to you and legal to figure out if we're better off doing a JPA versus an interlocal agreement.
Correct. And the intent of the group is just to have the governing parties sit together and discuss pros and cons. And clearly labor is going to have to come into play in terms of what type of labor management model we would look at. There's a whole host of questions. Does this trigger a new agreement? Is there succession language within the current contracts that are applicable, or are they not? These type of things. As the chief, I would recommend that at the very least it would be prudent for me to sit at the table and to hear what discussions are taking place, what direction the county organizations are looking at going in. This could clearly be of a significant benefit to the community, most specifically Reno, as we are a patchwork of jurisdictional boundaries, if you will. So I think there's value at the very least sitting at the table.
Okay. Any other? So do we want to, the agenda talks about a proposed motion, move to direct staff to, et cetera, et cetera. You want to take these individually?
Where would this be done under? Is this under the shared services or is this under the where do you anticipate this going for further study? Shared services or?
That we haven't gotten that far yet. It could certainly come under the umbrella of shared services. However, I believe the initial intent was from the county was to have a separate discussion specifically addressing fire-related issues. Again, I could seek direction on that from the other side of the county fence and bring that back to council.
Yeah, I would just like to know where it's going to go, because
Sure.
I'm in favor of moving it forward. I just don't want to hear it in two different committees and coming up with two different solutions.
Shared services?
It was brought up at Shared Services, Commissioner Butternut's invited the city to see if we'd like to participate, is where I heard it. I didn't necessarily hear that it would be a shared services responsibility. I think it was more the county inviting Reno to take a look. In terms of your question, Vice Mayor, about whether to do this as one motion at the end or as we go, either one's fine.
Okay. I'd like to do them as we go. If that's okay with it. It says, again, on our staff report, above motion is to move to consider regionalization fire service in Washoe County and direct staff to pursue blank as a mechanism for services. Well, we don't know what that mechanism is yet. So to bring it back to us for the mechanism, the options.
I think I'll make a motion that we direct staff to move forward on this, and primarily taking it to shared services in the county and JFAB to decide who would move it forward. So we have a consensus about where that's going to go. The county might want it somewhere else. And then to come back to us within 2 months with some of the financing issues to see if we're going to go any further than that.
Certainly.
Motion and second, further conversation.
And just under discussion, the reason I say that in 2 months is the county right now, I think they pay anywhere from, unincorporated county, pay anywhere from 48 to 52 cents for fire protection service. If a penny in Reno brings $500,000 and our budget in fire is $40 million, that would take 80 cents of our property taxes to do, which we legally couldn't do now anyway. So that's a huge issue right off the front that will tell us it's either a go or a no-go about whether we could do that with property taxes.
That's correct. And a portion of that $40 million is the subsidy
Right.
that we receive from Truckee Meadows, so it's actually reduced by
Right, so
about 15 million.
15 million. So it would be
Yes, sir.
25 million, which would be 50 cents, which is more doable. It might be in the place where we actually have that amount of money.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously.
Good afternoon. For the record, Maureen McKissick, Grant and Federal Legislative Affairs. The council last heard an item on the Community Assistance Center last Monday morning at the joint meeting. Staff has come back to you today to ask for additional direction because the Board of County Commissioners has this on their agenda tomorrow morning to seek clarification from their electeds on what staff will carry forward to shared services. And in light of the fact that this governing board was really the body which pushed this project forward, we wanted you to have the opportunity to weigh in. And specifically, we're asking whether or not you would like, going forward, to have a governing board for this project that includes an elected official. That would be the first point of direction that we're asking. And second, if there can be consensus around the purpose. So we are requesting that information today. Thank you.
Okay. Any comments? The motion
I'll
could,
make the motion that there be an elected official on the governing board. I know the mayor was adamant about that, so.
okay, motion and second, further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries unanimously. And the
Okay.
second part you're looking for?
The purpose. The staff report outlines the purposes identified to date, and we just wanted more or less your ratification that that's how you see the role of a future governing board, whether there would be anything you'd like to drop out of that or add to it, something along those lines.
No, I don't think so.
The purpose. That's why I sort of wish the mayor was here
Yeah.
on this one.
Yeah, I do too.
Well, specifically, we would like to know whether or not you agree that that board should provide policy direction. In the past, on issues that cropped up, we came to you for direction. Now the new board would be the place where we would take those kinds of questions, interface with the community, functions along those lines.
Yeah, I think that's the other thing that the mayor was pretty adamant about. He wanted this committee to look at some of those policy decisions. So I'll make the motion that the policy that would go to the new board and not just the Reno City Council.
Okay.
I want to clarify, I didn't mean to say not just the city council, not the city council. That implied both.
So you would like the new governing board to be the body to which those kinds of decisions
Yes.
come and not to come back to the city council then at a later date?
What about our funding of that? Then we would have to have some say about the funding, otherwise they would set the
I would assume it goes
policy.
by the the regional governing board standards. They have to live within the amount of funding we give them.
Okay.
So, if I'm looking at this, I mean, the composition of this board is City of Reno elected Sparks, Washoe County, Mental Health Division, Nevada Hospital Association, Reno Area Alliance for the Homeless, and an at-large.
That has been the form suggested to date. I don't believe that's written in stone. That would be subject to change, but these have been the stakeholders who have expressed an interest in being part of that board.
So who put this together? Did this come through our staff?
It's come through your staff. It's come up through conversations in the course of the last 4 years.
Okay.
It's pretty much, it captures where we are today in terms of the discussion. But it is subject to change if you'd like it to be changed.
And then basically everything would come out of our hands and this board would take over governance of the operation.
Correct.
I guess
based upon what Dave's proposing.
Excuse me, and looking at the composition of this board, it says 7, an at-large representative from the community. And that would come from, who would select that? If you have, well, that's a member of the board. So the makeup of the 3 elected, the State Mental Health, the Nevada Hospital Association, and the Alliance would then select that 7th member? Kevin?
Mr. Vice Mayor, 2 points here. The first one is the intent was that the rest of the board would be placed and then they would select the 7th. But another point is that your motion previously was only that we asked them to have elected officials on that board. The Shared Services Elected Officials Committee will have the opportunity to review this and will probably come up with a new version of what the board will look like through that process.
Okay.
And our members can just represent that we made the motion. We'd like to see elected officials on that board.
Okay.
Because I think the conversation that was had or hesitation, I would call it, that I heard at the meeting last week was several of the county commissioners were really uncomfortable with even developing this board because they really thought that it took the direction that we'd been moving toward, taking this to a faith-based, community-operated center, that it kind of threw the onus back on the electeds again, and they want to be moving away from that. And I think we need to keep that in mind. That's one of the reasons why I recommended that we take it to shared services so that we could have some detailed conversation about that.
I think the conversations, and my understanding, having been part of them for so long, is that there needs to be some nexus between political will and the needs of the community with the operations at the center. That regardless of how it's managed and who it's operated through, that these governing boards would still like to be able to have a say in how it operates and what it accomplishes. And I believe that was the intent of establishing this, not so much to continue having to make day-to-day decisions, but being available for policy direction.
Yeah, and I think the biggest concern is, I mean, obviously our constituents are the most impacted by this, you know, and I don't know how much control we want to relinquish in that.
Councilman Ayazi.
One thing I would maybe suggest is what we would vote to appoint the 3 elected officials, and they would determine what the makeup would be of the rest of them. I mean, because that is, I understand what the issue is, and I haven't been intimately involved with this at all, but like Reno Area Alliance for the Homeless, I know they originally said they would take this over, and I don't know where they've been in the last few years. I don't even know who they are anymore. So to just say that they get a seat on the board, I would question that. But they may have come forward. I honestly don't know. But I'm not there, but I think the three elected officials who got there could be the board, and we give them the authority to expand it up to 7 or something. But also, I heard the county, they just want it to be temporary, at least working toward that, getting it to not necessarily a faith-based, just a nonprofit-based organization to take it over.
Councilman Hastert.
Yeah, I would agree. Plus, we've got a lot of money invested over there too, so I don't know how much authority I'd want to give up. Even if you delegate policy decisions, I'd still think we should be kept in the loop. Similar like we do with some of our other committees, for the reasons Dwight stated, as well as the fact we've got millions of dollars invested over there.
Okay, so we had a motion to create the board from elected officials, or to create a board, but now are we changing that to have it just an elected official from each entity, and then let them go on and discuss?
It's just a thought, I don't know. Or do you, Sharon, you're on the shared services, correct? Do you feel that this would be handled, and that's all elected officials now, do you think it would be better handled there to see who would be on the board? Okay. Then let the Shared Services Committee determine the rest. We just want to make sure that there's an elected officials, and let the Shared Services determine what the makeup of the other individuals would be.
And remember, we've got 3 members on the Shared Services Board, Mr. Hashef, the mayor, and myself. So we're pretty well represented.
So I'm fine with letting you handle that.
So the motion to support the creation of an oversight board for the Community Assistance Center be sent to the Shared Services for final determination of the makeup of that board? Is that what your motion?
With the proviso that there be an elected official on the board from Reno. If the Sparks and Washoe doesn't want to be on there, that's okay with me, but at least from Reno.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and second. Further
Does that get you what you need today?
Actually, it does, because I think what staff was looking for was more specifics to carry to the Shared Services Committee, and that is very helpful, thank you. And can I assume also then that you are in consensus around the purpose of this as outlined in the staff report? Okay, thank you very much.
So we have a motion and second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously.
Rick Vandenberg, and I get to talk about dispatch. And as part of the shared services operation, Sheriff Haley came forward, the Shared Services Committee, and made a proposal to look at the possibility of regionalization of the 911 dispatch operation. As part of that, and as directed by the Shared Services Committee, I've been working with the sheriff, and there's some details that we're just kind of asking to say, can I get some direction on there? Because there's a lot of different ways on going like this, as I'm sure you're gathering from the other questions and the other presenters here. First and foremost, the sheriff's proposal is looking at doing a regional dispatch facility with a governing board, kind of like or structured after the 800 megahertz governing board and or the regional training center governing boards. Under those boards, if you will, there are assignees from each jurisdiction that's participating in either the 800 megahertz or the regional training that set the policy for the overall operation of that. Now, under this one, there would also be sub-boards made up of police and fire. Police would lay out the law enforcement policies that dispatch would run. Fire would lay out the fire policies by which the dispatchers would utilize for moving forward. Additionally, and what I didn't put in here is the concept that under this shared services, again, this is all preliminary, under the shared services consideration, basically budgets from the city of Reno and the incline budgets would be combined for startup. And as participating agencies began in there, we would supposedly, quote, only pay for the dispatch bodies that we need to satisfy the services within our jurisdiction. for example, if I needed, if our law enforcement or our police department needed 2 dispatchers per shift out there, that'd be a total of 6 dispatchers. We would supposedly only pay our portion of the budget as it relates to those 6 dispatch positions. There's more than 6, excuse me. 6, or those dispatch positions associated toward our police department. Does that make sense?
So you're saying if we needed 2, we'd pay for 2?
Yeah, exactly. 2 as a percentage of the overall budget of the dispatch center. There's a lot of players in this. We've got people, we've got the Nevada Highway Patrol coming to the plate. We do have MDOT coming up and talking to us about the possibility of adding their capabilities, their street monitoring and all of that into a facility. So there's a lot of different groups. I understand that there's some interest possibly from the Tahoe Basin and possibly from some other county facilities like Douglas that may be interested in our services there. What I'm bringing you today is in trying to narrow down the scope of everything that we're trying to work with here is to try and find out which way you'd like staff to go forward as we're working with the sheriff on this. So first and foremost, we'd like to find out, number one, do you agree with the concept of moving forward with a regional dispatch facility? Number two, we're kind of interested in the consolidation model that you'd like to see. And I laid out a couple of different types of consolidation models. They can go from a full consolidation where it's basically a standalone entity unto itself that just you just pay for use of the services, all the way down to a hybrid where we bring people in and different functions in, like maybe co-hosting REMSA up in that location. So there's some different model comparisons there. If there's a desire to go with a single type of model out there, it kind of helps narrow our focus on the way that we're going forward. And finally, I'd like to find out whether or not there's if the model, the governing model of the 800 megahertz style or the regional training style works for the council. And I'm ready to answer any questions.
Councilman.
What do we have now if it's not a regional dispatch?
For lack of a better term, it's a semi-regional dispatch. The only ones that we don't have playing in our center is the Incline facility. And Incline and the Sheriff's Department have started dispatching for the sheriff's deputies that are south of I-80. And we also don't, and you know, so what we're looking to do is kind of combine that all into one.
Couldn't it be done now? I mean, do we have to form a whole new entity? Can't we just say, okay, we'll start doing it under our existing agreements?
I would say that I think the reason the sheriff is looking to move forward through this is more of the design of the governing board. Right now, to be quite honest, I run the dispatch at the will of the city council.
And he doesn't like that? So is there, what I'm asking, is there a problem with that the sheriff perceives as a way that the city of Reno is running dispatch?
I think what I can't speak for the sheriff and what he's seeing as a problem or not a problem. There has been some issues that they've brought up to say they don't like the way some of the services are provided from dispatch. He does make some good points, though. If we have a regional dispatch operation up there, there's where we can say all of these players are participating and all of these players have a voice in how that dispatch operation is run. There's a greater potential for grant funding, and there's also a greater potential for more people to hopefully participate in the dispatch operation.
If the sheriff has had some concerns, how come we haven't heard them?
Hopefully because we've taken care of them as they've
So then
arisen.
there are no concerns today?
I can't speak for the sheriff.
No, but I mean, if you've been dealing with him and there's no concerns on the table with how it's being managed by the city of Reno? Or is there a list of them?
I don't think, no, I don't think as we're dealing right now today, that there's any major concerns. I think he's got a vision for a better way of operating it.
And, well, would we need a new building for that?
No, no. I think the assumption is that we would utilize the facility that we're in right now.
Because with NDOT, he wanted to build a new building.
NDOT was discussing the concept of building the new building. I think.
But he went to them to include dispatch into that new building.
Actually, NDOT went out to us, to the dispatch areas, and thought that we ought to be part of theirs.
Okay. I think that funding's not happening, though, by the way, just
Yeah,
so you know.
and the last conversation that we've had is NDOT is very interested in going up and looking at the EOC facility to see, maybe it makes sense to take advantage of that.
Imagine that. Then the other question is, what funding source are they using for the unincorporated residents to pay for their calls?
That I couldn't say.
That would be a keystone for me, because what they want is for the city of Reno and Sparks to pay for our proportionate of calls, but the unincorporated residents would not have to pay, they would just pay it out of the general fund. So if they're going to propose a tax on their residents to pay for that, I would look at that, but not if it's going to be just the general fund pays for the unincorporated residents, then the general fund should pay for all of us, because we all pay that tax.
Point. Councilman Hastreff.
Yeah, I was just going to, Rick pretty much touched on all of it. As I understood it, you'd have more participants, which would be more people paying into the system to provide regional dispatch, and you'd basically expand the area if you include North Tahoe and a bunch of other participants, and then also the grant funding question. So, I mean, a lot of this needs to get sorted out, obviously, and how this final model is going to look is going to be interesting, but I do think we should at least participate and see where he wants to go with this, and then be able to bring back reports to us on, your progress.
And that would include the governance structure, et cetera.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any other comments? The motion says, support the creation of a regional 911 PSAP utilizing a blank governance model that's to be determined, and following a blank consolidation model. I think those are two to be determined when you bring the information back to us.
And do we want to add in there funding model? So
Yes.
make sure we bring that back as far as.
Correct.
Yes.
All right.
So that would be, I'll make the motion, Mr. Mayor, just as you stated it,
With including the funding.
including the funding.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Rick, is this just for us to continue to explore, or is this actually approving the sheriff's request? I mean, I would interpret that we've been talking about explore, but you read those words literally, support the creation of. That says you've already agreed to it.
Yeah, pretty much. I guess, I got pretty clear direction from the Shared Services Committee to go forward with this, and I just want to make sure that I'm following the proper path that everybody wanted me to go on.
What I thought we were doing was still investigating.
Yeah,
Well, that's what I heard the motion was. It wasn't to form it, it was just to investigate it further and bring it back.
I've got to be honest when I say I think the sheriff is under the assumption that he wants to move forward with this very quickly. And I guess why we're up here is that they've got an initial project plan that is very aggressive. I mean, he's looking to have a completed regional dispatch by October of this year.
And maybe we should have the sheriff come talk to us.
And yeah, I mean, and that's one of the things I think we need to know is what does this model look like? Does it provide better service to the citizens? Does it save us money?
Right.
I don't think any of us up here can just say, yeah, go ahead and do it without knowing what the fiscal impact is or the impact to the services provided to the community.
But the vote that we take today really needs to make sure that we are guaranteeing we get that information and that it isn't just kind of a.
Well, I think Councilman Zetter makes an excellent point, because it did say the creation. I'd like to change the word of creation to exploration. Support the exploration of a regional 911 PSAP utilizing the blank governance model structure and following the blank consolidation. So I think that's an excellent point that you make, not just semantics, realistically, support the exploration of a regional 911. Would that?
Yeah, and I think that's what we did at Shared Services. I don't think we gave him an endorsement that we wanted. The way he made the presentation is similar to what you're doing. Here's my idea, here's my plan,
Right.
here's the potential participants. You support that because it is shared services, and we said we would support the notion, I guess, or the exploration. I don't think anybody at Shared Services signed on to say we're all in. So, and that's the same intent with this motion, is we want you at the table, just like the fire chief is, to sit at the table and figure out what this is going to look like, and then come back to us before we actually say, yes, we're going to participate.
And this helps a lot because, you know, I've got to be honest, I've been in a couple of meetings and I think there's a different assumption out there, so I can relay what we're hearing now and make sure everybody's on the same playing field.
Okay. So I'd add that as clarification to the motion that I made.
Good.
Clarification second? Yeah, that's fine. Okay, any other further discussion? Very good point. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carries unanimously.
And Mr. Mayor, just on the governance model, just to make a comment, I'd be really curious as to why, I didn't hear whether elected officials would be on that board or not. I personally think it would be important that there are. I mean, that's one of the reasons we get elected to do things, and I see a lot of people wanting us out and out and out, but we're the ones who have to set that. I couldn't imagine a board of non-elected people deciding who gets ambulance service or not, you know, or what level is the fire department going to answer calls.
I agree. I think you're right. Okay, thank you, Rick.
Thank you.
Mr. Hester.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have the last item, batting cleanup here. On the Regional Planning Agency, I guess we have a couple
The last
questions.
Hester did that got traded, in case you wanted to know that.
I know Baltimore, I know. I got
Baltimore,
that,
that's
yeah.
right.
Really Norfolk, Virginia, which I have no desire to go to, but anyway. There was some confusion on the staff's part, probably my fault, on whether this was going to the Shared Services Committee of elected officials or the Shared Services Subcommittee, so we'd like your clarification of that. Just for your information, the Regional Planning Director is under the impression it's to the Elected Officials Committee, which probably makes more sense since Sparks is on it as well. And I have a little background information, just because some of you are not on the Regional Planning Governing Board, and then I'll suggest how we move forward at that committee. For those of you who don't know, there's a specific piece of legislation, NRS 278.026 through 029, which is unique to Washoe County, Reno, and Sparks, and it requires a comprehensive regional plan. There's what's in that plan is required, that it has to be updated every 5 years. There's some other provisions in there for things like review of projects of regional significance, annexation and how that happens. And we have to conform our master plan to that, and major projects have to be found in conformance with that plan. That legislation also requires there to be a director of regional planning that, quote, cannot hold any other position related to planning with a regional or local entity in the county, and he or she must have a professional assistant. So you're required basically to have two positions funded. The funding formula is in proportion to your governing board representation. In this case, it's four of the 10 are from Reno, so that's 40%, and then three are from from Sparks and the county respectively, so they pay 30%. We talked about that number this year, and so far next year is $371,000 for 40%. There are some alternatives that have been discussed, I would say, over the last couple of years. Councilman Ayazi has brought it up a number of times at the RTC and the regional planning merge. There have been recent discussions on the Western Regional Water Commission being included in that. In my staff report, I mentioned the same thing I mentioned this morning, that sometimes happens with councils of government or associations of government in other states. Some of the other options that have been discussed are minimizing the agency staff, using more resources from local governments. That's the way it started out 12 years ago, is that basically the staffs from the two cities in the county did most of the work with a small regional staff. There's been discussion over the years of an alternative funding source, maybe a dedicated property tax, something like that, and there's even been discussion of changing the legislation so that there doesn't have to be a required staff or whatever. There have been comments made, most recent, I think was Councilman Ayazi the other day, saying no matter how we fund it and what the structure is, that there is some value to having that regional plan there because it does resolve issues, intergovernmental issues. So, and I would second that wholeheartedly, that we still need that forum to deal with those issues. So assuming that you all would send it to the Shared Services Elected Officials Committee, my suggestion would be that Ms. Coombs has put together, the Executive Director has put together a number of papers with RTC staff and other staff on options, and that maybe the first thing we want to do is, if it goes to the Shared Services Elected Officials Committee, have her and those people present those options to you, and then have the Shared Services Elected Officials Committee take it from there. So that would be my suggestion, but if you have other direction, that's fine with us too.
That's a motion.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Yeah, I'll second the motion, but at the same time, I think the point was earlier made that, I mean, all three governments have to make the final decision on how we have to do that. So it'd just be a recommendation from the Shared Services Committee. And what we did talk about, Dave, in part was your idea about folding it into the RTC as opposed to completely abandoning regional governing for the very reasons that John stated. I think it's important to have. So ultimately, we may have to re-up that committee and see if RTC has any interest.
And John, I just want to ask it, because the motion, proposed motion anyway, talks about business license and work on this issue before or after the business license issue.
That was when I had made the assumption it was going to that subcommittee.
Okay.
So that's
out. Okay.
Irrelevant.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Our next agenda item was continued. So C9, or C agenda item.
Move to adjourn.
Second. We're adjourned.